When I said no to giving my husband's brother money, his whole family decided to take a vote to force me. They smiled and said, "Majority rules." My husband just sat there and watched. I smiled back and said, "Okay, let's vote on something else." Then I pulled out a piece of paper and everything went wild. This happened last year. It still hurts. Still feels fresh. I was married for 8 years. I thought I knew what loyalty meant. I believed marriage was about being a team. I thought family meant the people who stood by you when things got tough. I was wrong. Let me take you back. I live in a small town in upstate New York. My husband, Walter, comes from a big old-fashioned family. Sunday dinners at Mom's house. Everyone having strong opinions and lots of unspoken rules. That wasn't how I grew up, but I tried to fit in. I showed up, brought food, smiled, played nice. But his family never really accepted me. They were polite, but I always felt like an outsider, like they were all in on a joke I didn't get. Still, I loved Walter, and I thought love would be enough. Then his younger brother Ryan got into big money trouble. Ryan's always chasing some big idea, selling stuff online, crypto schemes, flipping luxury cars. None of it ever works. The family always made excuses. He's just figuring things out. He's got big dreams. This time, he took out a huge loan and convinced their parents to co-sign. Of course, he couldn't pay it back, and now the bank was after them. That's when they came to me, expecting me to fix it. I'm a surgical nurse. I work hard and save smart. Walter and I don't have kids, and we've been careful with money. So Ryan showed up at our house with his sad story, asking for $18,000, just for a few months. I told him no, politely, calmly. I explained our money was going into house repairs, and I wasn't comfortable lending that much, especially with his history. He didn't argue, just nodded and left. I actually felt a little bad for him until 3 days later. That's when I was invited to a family meeting at Walter's parents' house. Everyone was there, siblings, spouses, parents, except Ryan. He was running late. They all smiled that fake, too nice smile. Then Walter's dad spoke. He said they'd been talking. They were worried about Ryan. And since I had the money, they wanted to be fair and take a vote. Yes, a vote. Like this was a business deal and I was just some obstacle. I looked at Walter, hoping he'd say something. He didn't, just looked worn out. Or scared. I couldn't tell. I asked, "Are you serious?" His mom said, "Yes, majority rules. That way it's fair." I didn't say a word. They voted. Every single one of them voted yes, we should give Ryan the money. Then they all stared at me, waiting. Like I was supposed to just agree because they held some creepy little vote. I looked at them and said, "All right, let's vote on something else." They looked confused. I kept my voice calm. Then I pulled a manila envelope out of my purse and slid it across the table to Walter. He looked confused. His dad asked, "What's this?" I said, "It's a copy of the deed for the house Walter and I own. My name is the only one on the title." Everyone went quiet. I opened the envelope and pulled out another paper. And here's an amendment to the prenup I had made last month. Since you all like votes, I thought I'd make sure my money is clearly separated. Walter, I left a copy of it on your nightstand last week, just in case. His mom looked shocked. His sister's mouth dropped open. His dad's face turned red. I looked straight at Walter. "So do you want to vote again? This time about whether we stay married?" He didn't answer. The room was silent. Then Ryan walked in, acting like nothing was wrong. He smiled that same cocky half smile. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sitting down like this was no big deal. He looked around, noticed the envelope on the table, and saw everyone's faces. "What did I miss?" he asked, grinning. No one said anything. His mom cleared her throat. "We were discussing options." I looked at Ryan and said, "I told them no." He tilted his head. "Yeah, and we voted." I smiled a little. "Right, and I voted too, with legal papers." That wiped the smile off Ryan's face. He looked confused, trying to figure out what just happened. That's when I realized. He didn't know about the prenup change. He didn't know I was serious. He looked at Walter. "Dude, what the hell?" Walter just sat there, still not saying anything. Ryan lost it. He stood up and yelled, "You're just going to let her do this? Let her embarrass us like this?" The word us hit me hard, like I wasn't a person, just some enemy to him. Walter opened his mouth but still said nothing. That's when Walter's dad slammed his fist on the table. "This is not how family works," he shouted. "You don't bring lawyers into family matters. We are not strangers." I leaned forward. "You made this a business deal when you voted like that. You treated me like a bank. I'm just responding the same way." His face turned purple. That's when the next twist came. Walter's sister, Morgan, quiet and always keeping to herself, spoke up. She said, "I'm tired of pretending too." Everyone turned to her. "I gave Ryan $10,000 last year. Never got it back. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want drama. But now, I'm done staying quiet." The room was silent. Ryan blinked. "What are you talking about?" Morgan laughed, but it was bitter. "You promised to pay me back. You said you were flipping a Tesla and needed the money fast. Then you ghosted me." Ryan looked at his mom. "She's lying." But the whole room shifted, like a fog cleared. Then Walter's youngest brother, Jason, spoke up. "I thought I was the only one," he said quietly. "I gave him $5,000 on my credit card. He said it was for a course. That was 2 years ago." Suddenly, it was like everyone started speaking up. A cousin, an uncle. Even Walter's mom looked shocked. Turns out, Ryan had been asking for money from everyone, always with promises and lies. I just sat there silent, watching everything fall apart. Ryan tried to yell over them. "You're all just trying to make me look bad." I leaned back in my chair. "You didn't need help with that." He turned to Walter, panicked. "Say something, man." Walter finally looked at me and asked, "When did you change the prenup?" That was it. No apology. No offer to talk. Just that. I stared at him for a long time, feeling exhausted, not sad. "About 6 weeks ago," I said, right after Ryan's last opportunity came up. His mom was crying now. His dad sat down, drained from the fight. Ryan stormed out. No one followed him. I grabbed my purse. Walter stood up like he was going to follow me. I held up my hand. "Don't." And I left. But that night, I got a message from Morgan. She wanted to talk. What she told me changed everything. I thought I knew about Walter's family and my marriage, but trust me, the story gets darker. Let me know if you want part 3. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hoping to feel something. Anger, sadness, clarity. But nothing. Just silence. Around 2 a.m., I finally opened a message from Morgan. It said, "Can we talk? I know things I didn't say earlier. You deserve to know." We met the next afternoon at a coffee shop in town. Morgan looked tense but calm. She didn't waste any time. "I don't know how to say this without making it worse," she started. "But I've been waiting for someone to see through Ryan. And maybe Walter too." That last part hit me hard. I asked her what she meant. She took a deep breath. "Ryan's been using people for years, but Walter, he's not just a bystander." I didn't understand at first. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. "You know that crypto thing Ryan tried last year? The one that blew up and left him broke?" I nodded. "Walter was involved. They did it together. That's where most of Ryan's debt came from." I just stared at her, speechless. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots, messages, emails, even a payment trail. Walter wasn't just aware of Ryan's messes, he was helping him, moving money between their accounts, covering for him. I felt dizzy. "He told me not to say anything," Morgan said softly. "He promised to make things right." I believed him. But now I see he was just protecting himself. I whispered, "He used our savings." Morgan looked at me but didn't answer. She didn't need to. I remembered something. A few months ago, I saw a big withdrawal from one of our accounts. Walter said it was for emergency repairs. He even showed me a fake invoice. I believed him. I felt sick. Morgan reached out and touched my hand. "You weren't crazy. You were never crazy." I nodded slowly, then asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" She hesitated and then said, "Because I found something else out." I braced myself. "Walter and Ryan went to your parents last month. Tried to borrow from them too." I blinked. "What?" "They told your parents you were thinking of investing in Ryan's new business. They wanted your parents to get in before it launched. Your mom called me after you left last night. She was worried. That's when I realized they're not just using you. They're trying to sell you out." I couldn't breathe. They had gone behind my back, using my name to trick my own parents. I stood up, needing to move, think, do something. Morgan grabbed my arm. I know you're angry, but if you're going to do anything, be smart. Be one step ahead. I'll help. I asked her what she meant. She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was sharp, tired. I've been keeping track of everything for years. Bank records, texts, emails, screenshots. You want to make a clean break? You'll need proof. That's when the numbness cracked. Something inside me snapped into place. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. Not Walter. Not Ryan. Not any of them. I looked Morgan in the eye. Send me everything. And she did. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to ruin them, financially, emotionally, and legally if I wanted to. But I wasn't done. The more I dug, the more I found. Walter had another secret, one that had nothing to do with money. One that explained why he never defended me and why Ryan had so much control. A week passed. Every day, I found something new. Another transfer, another lie, another thread in the web Walter and Ryan had created. I had Morgan's folder. I had my bank records. I even checked my credit. Walter had applied for 2 credit cards in my name, never used them, just kept them there, probably for the next scheme. The night of the final confrontation, I didn't plan for it to explode like it did. But it did, and once it started, it didn't stop. Walter's mom invited everyone to another Sunday dinner. Same house, same table. This time, I agreed. I had one goal. I wanted everyone in one room. When we got there, the atmosphere felt fake, forced smiles, tense laughter. They thought the storm had passed. Walter sat next to me like everything was normal. He kept checking his phone but smiled whenever someone looked. Ryan wasn't there yet. Late again. Typical. I waited until the food was served, drinks poured, and everyone was comfortable. Then I stood up and said, I think it's time for one more vote. They froze. Walter looked at me, confused. I pulled out a small stack of papers from my bag. I didn't make a big scene. I just laid them on the table, one by one. This, I said, pointing at the first paper, is proof of a joint bank account between Walter and Ryan. Opened 3 years ago, nearly $60,000 transferred, most of it from our accounts, some from loans. Walter's mom opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. This, I said, pointing at another paper, is a fake invoice Walter gave me 3 months ago. Said it was for roof repairs. The company doesn't exist. Silence. And this, I held up the last page, is an email sent to my parents using my name, promising them a share of Ryan's fake startup. Walter, you see yourself. Walter's face went pale. No one spoke, so I kept going. I thought Ryan was the only one who lied. But you, I turned to Walter. You're just better at hiding it. You knew I'd say no, so you went around me. You used me. His mom whispered, that can't be true. Morgan spoke up from the end of the table. It is. She pulled out her phone. I've got the messages. Walter asked me to cover for him when he took out the money. He said he'd fix it before she noticed. Finally, Walter stood up, angry. What do you want from me? I was trying to fix things. Ryan was in deep. I didn't think. You never think. I cut him off. You lie. You protect him because he knows your secrets. That's why you never defended me, isn't it? Walter looked at me, and for the first time in all of this, he looked guilty. I stepped closer. What does Ryan have on you, Walter? Silence. He blinked, swallowed, and then muttered, It's not like that. Then what is it like? He looked around the table, at his dad, and then at Morgan. And then he cracked. He covered for me, years ago, when I got into trouble at a job. I falsified reports. I could have gone to jail. He took the blame. I owed him. The room went silent. Walter's dad spoke, quiet but furious. You lied to us. To her, you used your wife to cover a debt you should have paid honestly. Walter looked down. I didn't know what else to do. She always had control over the money. I need a way to fix it before she noticed. That word again. Control. He saw me as the one with the money, the power, the gatekeeper. Not as a partner. Just as a tool. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just reached into my purse and pulled out one last paper. I placed it in front of him. He stared at it and opened it. His face dropped. It was a divorce petition. Already signed by me, no drama, no shouting. Just an end. Majority rules, right? I said quietly. Well, I vote to leave. Then I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. Not even his mom. That night, I stayed in a hotel. 3 hours later, Morgan texted me. He left. No one said goodbye. The fallout happened fast. Walter called me, left a voicemail, crying. He said he was lost. Said he didn't know how things got this bad. Said we could rebuild. I didn't answer. 2 days later, I served the divorce papers. Turns out, the prenup update and all the documents helped more than just saving money. It saved me from dragging out a divorce I never knew I'd need. Guilt over. Morgan kept helping. She even decided to take legal action against Ryan for the unpaid loan. Ryan disappeared for a while. He deleted his social media. People say he's living in New Jersey now, working under a fake company. Walter moved back in with his parents. The family dinners stopped. I wish I could say I walked away clean, but I didn't. There were nights I cried myself sick. Nights I wondered if I'd made the right choice. 8 years with someone who looked me in the eye and still chose lies over truth. It sticks with you. But now, I sleep peacefully for the first time in years. And if there's one thing I learned, when someone says majority rules, remember this. You don't need a vote to leave a burning house. You just need the courage to walk out the door. And I did.
I've sold this house to my parents. Let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore. Phil pointed at me, urging me to leave the house quickly. After that, he continued to throw insulting words at me. My in-laws joined in, laughing along. However, I remained undisturbed by such comments and calmly accepted the need to leave. I had a plan. After quickly preparing my belongings, I left the house. Those three still didn't understand the true hardship that was about to unfold. My name is Rachel Wagner. I'm in my 50s. After many years of marriage, my children are already independent. Although I used to work as a regular office worker, I am now a teacher of handmade accessory making, a hobby of mine thanks to a friend's introduction. For me, getting this job was a stroke of luck. I enjoy my beloved craft, surrounded by kind and caring students. While some may frown upon continuing a hobby as a profession, I feel fortunate to be in such a wonderful environment. I met Phil at the company where I used to work. Although we were at different companies, frequent interactions due to business dealings led to a mutual attraction that led to dating and eventually marriage. 3 years after getting married, I gave birth to a healthy boy. He graduated from a top university and secured a job at a major company. He now lives with his very attractive wife. As a parent, I feel unparalleled joy. However, my daily life took a turn for the worse. Decades into our marriage, with our child out on his own, Phil's once gentle nature had vanished. "Hey, Rachel, isn't dinner ready yet?" Before I knew it, I was being treated like a convenient housekeeper, constantly ordered and directed. Worse yet, his demands changed daily. One day, he complained the soup was too strong, so I made it lighter the next day, only to be yelled at for it being too weak. Experimenting, I served the same taste every day, only to be constantly criticized for it being too strong or too weak. I had felt it before, but perhaps he was just amusing himself by troubling me. That thought was disappointing. How childish he seemed. No matter what I did, Phil would quickly become angry, frequently hurling disrespectful words at me. Living this way made me desperately want to leave, to escape from Phil at the earliest opportunity. I've thought about it countless times since he changed. But there's a reason I can't leave. It's because of an outstanding mortgage. Phil quit his job suddenly without reason and now spends his days idly at home. Despite this, he never helps with the housework. When I return from work, I find a floor littered with empty alcohol cans and snack wrappers. As a result, we're getting by on my earnings. In truth, we had just recently rebuilt our house. I provided all the funds for it. I keep the household account book, monitoring our financial situation. I've been diligently saving up, gathering funds for the house construction. I can't just leave the house I worked so hard to build. If I leave, it becomes Phil's. On top of the mortgage, there's another important reason. This house is a place filled with my hopes and dreams. The exterior, interior, and facilities were all designed according to my wishes. What I particularly like is the spaciousness of the kitchen. Our kitchen is very spacious, making it a comfortable environment for cooking. During meetings with the designer, Phil frequently interjected his opinions, but when I firmly said, "I'm providing the funds, so I'd like my wishes to be considered a bit," he fell silent. Months passed, and despite various difficulties, our house was finally completed. Not all my wishes could be met due to budget constraints, but still, our ideal home was built. I am very satisfied with the outcome. However, on the flip side, we ended up with a large mortgage due to going over budget. Having a substantial mortgage in my 50s is tough, but thinking about my dream home gives me strength. Despite it being a new home, Phil seemed dissatisfied that his opinions weren't much reflected. He complained, "This facility is unnecessary. It's a waste of money." But he gradually stopped grumbling when I ignored him. Instead, he started to leave trash around and deliberately dirtied the room. Was it out of spite? When will this situation improve? These thoughts weigh on me as I go through my days. A few months after building the house, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. There were no visitors scheduled for today. Who could it be? As I started to move slowly towards the entrance, Phil suddenly stood up as if he realized something and hurried toward the door. There was a sense of anticipation in his behavior. After a while, cheerful and lively conversation could be heard from the entrance, growing louder over time. When the living room door opened slowly, unexpected visitors were there. What? Father and mother. Yes, there stood my somewhat difficult-to-handle father-in-law, Henry, and mother-in-law, Debbie. When we first met, they had thrown demeaning words at me. At our wedding, they even complained about trivial things. Their interference continued afterward, causing me much distress. Recently, our contact had decreased, and I thought we had found some peace. But then this visit happened, even though I politely said hello. They passed by as if I was air, deliberately bumping into my shoulder. "Look, isn't this house wonderful? I want you to see various things here." Phil eagerly spoke. "What a nice house. How happy one must be living in such a lovely place. The kitchen is so spacious and functional," exclaimed my mother-in-law. "Indeed, it's enviable. I can see why you two would be comfortable here," praised my father-in-law. Phil showed them around the house, explaining features that piqued their interest. When they returned to the living room, there was a satisfied smile on my in-laws' faces. However, in contrast to the cheerful atmosphere, Phil scolded me loudly. "Hey, aren't the coffee and snacks ready yet? How can you make my parents wait?" Rushed by his angry voice, I hurried to prepare the coffee and snacks. But since there was no prior notice of the visit, I had to serve whatever snacks I had on hand. This made them upset. "What kind of joke is this when your husband's parents are visiting? Really? Always a petty woman." They expressed their dissatisfaction but finished all the coffee and snacks provided. "This house seems really comfortable to live in. Dad and Mom, you're always welcome. Don't hesitate to come." After that, they left without saying thanks for the meal or anything else. Ultimately, their attention was solely on Phil, only glancing at me when expressing their complaints. After they left, I realized something. It had been a long time since I saw Phil laugh so brightly. From that day on, at Phil's invitation, they began visiting frequently. Initially, it was about twice a month, but gradually it increased to once a week, and eventually, they started coming almost daily. Most of what they said during their visits were complaints about me. Phil never defended me. He just nodded along with his parents' remarks. He even agreed with his parents' opinions and complained about me. "Rachel really doesn't listen to what I say. It's troubling me. Rachel is really a high-maintenance person. I've felt it since we first met, but to see her troubling my son like this, I never intended to trouble them. In fact, I am the one who is troubled. Yet, I couldn't convey this and merely apologized. Their visits seemed to continue. I couldn't be sure because they visited when I wasn't around, and I didn't see them every day. Nevertheless, they seemed to drink alcohol during the day, and when I came home, empty cans were scattered on the floor. The newly bought rug had stains from spilled drinks. Could you at least clean up the empty cans? The new house smells of alcohol, and there are stains on the floor, which is troublesome. Quiet. You should just keep earning money in silence. Just do as I say, okay? Understand? Really now. It seemed he didn't realize who was earning the money for the alcohol. Besides alcohol, Phil also spent money on gambling. Occasionally, I would find crumpled betting tickets next to the alcohol cans. When I realized Phil was gambling, I tried to advise him. We didn't have financial leeway in the first place. If he continued to waste money on gambling, our situation would only worsen. It's one thing if it were his income, but using the money I earned, I feel more sadness than anger. Weeks have passed since his parents began visiting frequently. They would still come when I was not home. How should I turn this situation around? Sometimes when I came home early from work, I would find them brazenly using my home's facilities. I let out a surprised "ah," and when they noticed me, they clicked their tongues. My presence seemed to be an annoyance to them. Yet, this is my place. There's no reason for me to be treated as an unwanted presence. How should I overcome this difficult situation? I was already at my limit taking care of Phil, let alone dealing with his parents. Finally, I decided to confront Phil and his parents and began to formulate a plan. A few weeks later, they unusually visited while I was home. "Hello. It's rare for you to come when I'm here," I said sarcastically, and they gave me a sharp look. "If we knew you were here, we would have changed our visiting time. You always look so unremarkable." It was clear that my presence made them uncomfortable. They brushed past me and entered the living room confidently. "There you are. We've been waiting." Phil greeted his parents with a smile and led them to the kitchen. They seemed to think of this place as their home. In the kitchen, Debbie happily operated the equipment. "This kitchen is nice. I can't wait to use it. The food Mom makes here will surely be exquisite." After tinkering with the appliances, they said, "Let's check the bathroom next," and proceeded there. Inspecting the facilities of our house, which they had visited frequently, felt strange. It was as if they were doing a final check. With a look of anticipation, they left the house. "What were you doing? That's none of your business. Keep your mouth shut." Even when I asked what he had been up to, Phil told me nothing. But it doesn't matter if he doesn't tell me. The reason is that I was fully aware of what Phil and his parents were planning. Phil tried to keep his plan from me, but his attempts were so comical that I couldn't help but smirk when he wasn't looking. 1 week later, when I returned from work, a large truck was parked in front of our house. It had "Moving Center" written on its side. When I made eye contact with Phil standing next to the truck, he completely ignored me and went inside the house with the movers. Uncertain whether it was the right time to enter, I stood outside and watched just as his parents arrived. "Oh, you're already here, Dad. Quick, let's go inside." After a brief glance at me, my in-laws, treating me as if I were invisible, entered the house without exchanging any words with me. Minutes passed, and the movers left. The three of them watched the truck leave with satisfaction. Once the truck was out of sight, they turned their attention to me. "Oh, Rachel, you're back? We didn't notice at all." "Really? When did you get back?" Pretending to be innocent, they approached me. "We need to talk. Please, come inside." As I stepped in, I noticed that most of the furniture had been replaced with items from Phil's parents' house. My beloved shelves and desk were gone, likely taken away by the movers. Sitting on the newly replaced sofa, the three of them stared at me with an eerie smile. "We have an important discussion to make. You have no right to oppose now, so just listen quietly." An important talk. When I questioned back, Phil, with a sneering tone, said, "I've sold this house to my parents. Let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore." As soon as he finished his sentence, his parents chimed in, "Exactly right. So, from today, you are a stranger to us. Strangers should leave promptly." Debbie's words were followed by Phil and Henry's laughter. "Did you hear that? You're a stranger, so get out." "Mom, that's really funny." "Yes, she's a stranger now, so she should leave quickly. This house is no longer yours." While saying this, Phil handed me the already filled out divorce papers. However, I wasn't fazed at all. I had anticipated all of this. Understood. Then let's proceed with the divorce. I'll sign the divorce papers now. I signed quickly, placed my wedding ring on the table, stood up, and declared, I will move out now. My calm demeanor seemed to dumbfound the remaining three. There's a solid reason why I could remain so composed. I had installed surveillance cameras all around the house. When his parents started visiting frequently and kept talking about living here, I grew suspicious. Their increasing visits and specific timings raised my doubts, making me suspect a conspiracy with Phil, which led me to install the cameras. At first, I hesitated. Is it permissible to monitor one's family like this? I feared that if nothing untoward was happening, I would be the one criticized. But, driven by daily stress, I finally decided to install the cameras. I could check the footage from these cameras on my smartphone at any time. Whenever I took a break, I started checking the footage. On the first day, there was no significant change. His parents visited, and they engaged in casual conversation with Phil. The focus of the conversation was Phil's daily grievances, and his parents just nodded sadly. So you've been feeling that way. Truly, she is no good, causing her husband such distress. The video also captured their voices clearly. Have they forgotten who have been supporting the household? Since installing the cameras, I've been pondering how they will manage their living after I'm gone. Days later, the screen showed Phil and his parents in an unusually cheerful mood. What had happened? Listening carefully, it sounded like Phil was discussing selling his house to his parents. When I first heard this, I thought it was a joke, but the discussions about selling the house continued the next day, and the day after that. It became undeniable that Phil indeed intended to sell the house to his parents. His parents were enthusiastic about the plan, discussing various projects like buying new furniture and making the house barrier-free. After hearing these conversations, I secretly began looking for a new house. The surveillance footage recorded the mover's schedule and the divorce plans. I prepared to move to a new place in time for the day I would be driven out. I also initiated the process to change the name on the mortgage contract. Since the divorce was decided, the house was no longer mine. Therefore, I thought it appropriate to transfer the payment responsibility to Phil and his parents. The mortgage I was paying was $2,800 a month. I doubted they could afford it, but that was to be their problem after we get divorced. I intended to refuse any requests for financial assistance. Driven out from home, I headed to my new residence. New furniture was already arranged there, and I was ready to start a new life. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed and fell into a deep sleep. Luckily, the next day was a holiday. Relieved to have started a new life away from Phil, I slept longer than usual and woke up past noon. I couldn't recall the last time I slept so soundly since getting married. I was hungry but still felt sleepy. Just as I considered sleeping a bit more, the doorbell rang. When I responded, I saw an enraged Phil and his parents. What? Why are they here? I didn't recall sharing this address. How did they find this place? Without giving me time to wonder, they barged in. Then, they suddenly produced a document. What's this? A notice for changing the mortgage name? Yes, that's right. I no longer live in that house, and effectively, we are strangers. Even so, right after I moved, they received the notice for the mortgage name change. They seemed shocked by the amount. We have no income right now. How can we pay $2,800 a month? That's right. Our pension isn't that much. They pleaded as if it was all my fault. Beside them, Phil nodded as if agreeing. No matter how much they blamed me, the situation wouldn't change. Maybe the house was a bit luxurious, but it's true that we went over the budget. But who was it that neglected to seek information and lazed around every day? Moreover, they themselves were trying to forcefully acquire a house that belonged to someone else. Had they known the actual amount of the mortgage, they probably would have reconsidered. While I remained silent, Phil, visibly angry, crumpled the document and approached me. Just so you know, I have no intention of paying such an amount. Leaving those words behind, he threw the document onto the floor. His parents remained silent about the situation, seemingly unaware of what non-payment of the mortgage would entail. I hadn't expected adults to lack such basic knowledge. You're free to choose not to pay, but do you understand the consequences? You'll end up having to pay it anyway, won't you? They seemed to misunderstand that I would ultimately be responsible for the payment. So, I elaborated on the specific consequences of not paying the mortgage. In fact, if you don't pay, late fees will be added. That means you'll need to spend more than $2,800 each month. Do you understand? Is that some kind of joke? Unbelievable. You're the ones who are misunderstanding. Why don't you check the details yourself? After that, Henry encouraged Phil to verify, and Debbie showed a similar response. Seconds passed, and Phil's expression gradually turned serious as he started operating his smartphone. I can't believe this is happening. I told you the cost would increase if you delay. You can find this information online. The three of them stared at Phil's smartphone. Debbie was the first to speak up. We don't have any money. Oh, right. What about savings? What's happening with the division of assets? There are none. Since Phil hasn't been working and squandered everything on gambling, there are no assets left to divide. I stated this definitively, causing Phil's face to turn even paler. So, I recommend you give up and look for a job. It's a waste of time to linger here. What do you mean? We've been together for years. Don't you think you should help out a bit? Do you realize how much we've supported you? I had no memory of being supported. I couldn't recall any assistance from his parents. I haven't received any help. I communicated this clearly and understandably, but they kept pleading, trying to rebuild our familial relationship and revive our marriage. I found it bothersome to even engage with them anymore. I forced the noisy trio outside and called the police, reporting that there were loud people outside. I treated their complaints as if it was someone else's problem. Indeed, in reality, they were now strangers. As a result, they were taken away by the police for causing a disturbance outside my house. After the police inquiry, they decided they couldn't afford the mortgage for economic reasons and moved to a small apartment out of town. I heard they finally understood the importance of working and were striving to find jobs, though unsuccessfully. Phil, however, managed to find a part-time job and was barely supporting the two of them with his modest income. As for me, I'm busy with work, but started a blog about my handmade crafts, which has doubled my income. The blog has received a lot of positive feedback, and I've been getting more requests to teach at handcraft workshops. Now, I prioritize living an independent life over marriage. During this time, I found the household ledger from when I was living a frugal life. The memories. I felt a wave of nostalgia. Those challenging days are now a valuable experience. I vowed to seize happiness with my own hands and put the ledger away. I'm a little shocked that you would criticize my mother-in-law. If you're not working, why don't you get out of here? My sister-in-law and mother-in-law, who did not know that I was taking over my mother-in-law's debt, threw these words at me without the slightest sense of gratitude. Yes, I understand. But it's up to you guys from now on. The day I packed my bags, they realized a fact I had been hiding and put their heads together. My name is Emma. I am 32 years old, a busy career woman working in an office in the city. When I was a student, I spent most of my time in the corner of the library, absorbed in my books. After I got a job, I was buried under a mountain of work and forgot to take time for myself. One of my friends, who sincerely cared about me, said, "Emma, why don't you try to cherish your love life a little?" And she organized a group blind date for me. Then, a man whose eyes met mine was John, who worked in a building in the city center. He is a fresh salaryman working in a building in the city center. And to my surprise, he seemed to be a little interested in me. I was nervous about the feeling of dating after a long time, but supported by his kind words, we gradually opened our hearts to each other. Then he made a gentle confession to me, and our love accelerated. Only 1 year later, we decided to get married. It was like a dream come true that I, who had been so absorbed in my work, could stand at such a wonderful turning point in my life. My friend who organized the group blind date was also surprised at our sudden development. She said, "Oh, really? You're getting married?" I said, "Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? But it's great. I'm so glad I organized that group blind date. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the wedding. I'm looking forward to it." Thus, I was to open the door to a new life. First, we reported to each other's families. Seeing me so happy, my parents welcomed him warmly. "Emma, you haven't told me about your boyfriend for a long time, so I was a little worried that maybe you wouldn't get married. John, please take care of her from now on." When I heard these words, I felt as if I realized for the first time what my parents really thought of me. I realized that parents think a lot of things without saying them. My family had been basically free to do whatever I wanted, so there was no pressure to get married. But it seems that in my parents' mind, there was a wish to see their daughter happily married someday. Knowing such a parent's wish made my heart warm a little. And when I visited John's house for the first time, I met his family with nervous excitement. But his mother and father were both very warm and made me feel very safe. Next, we had dinner with the whole family. While I was looking forward to it, I was also a little nervous, especially because I had heard that John's sister, Melissa, was there. She was only 25 years old, and her choice of words was a little rough at times, which made me a little confused. She asked me, "Emma, you're already at that age. Weren't you getting married too late?" I was a little shocked to hear her say things like, "I would have decided sooner if I were you." But John followed up and we had a nice dinner afterwards. We then planned our wedding and had a happy wedding at a place we loved. We had a lot of friends and family there, and the day was really great. Our honeymoon was so much fun, and when we returned home, we started our new life together. Life together was fresh, and every day was so much fun. We went out on dates and watched movies at home. I felt that newlyweds are really happy. It has been about 2 years since we got married. One day, our peaceful everyday life changed drastically. We received the news that my father-in-law had passed away. Of course, I knew he had health problems, but I had not expected him to pass away so soon. My husband and I were deeply saddened by this sudden news. My mother-in-law's grief was especially deep, and I could feel her emotions as I looked at her. But our surprise was compounded by what we subsequently found out. In fact, my mother-in-law was in deep debt. It was apparently due to the fact that she had been cheated by some unscrupulous person and lost a large sum of money. When we learned of this fact, we could only gape. My husband, with his usual gentle nature, said he wanted to help her somehow. So, we decided to use our shared savings to reduce my mother-in-law's debt as much as possible. I thought it would be too hard for her to bear that heavy debt alone after my father-in-law's death. However, my mother-in-law's reaction was a little unexpected. She said something like, "If I am in trouble again, can I ask John for help?" My husband was a little surprised and replied, "That's a little." My mother-in-law said something positive, "But I'll find a way to get more money somehow." But my husband was worried. "I hope that's not gambling." We kept a watchful eye on my mother-in-law and were on the lookout for any trouble she might get herself into again. In the midst of all this, my husband was suddenly injured and had to be hospitalized. That event also became a big ordeal for my husband and me. Since every day was spent flitting back and forth from the hospital to take care of my husband, I never noticed any changes in my mother-in-law's daily routine. Then one day, after my husband was discharged from the hospital, I decided to pay a little visit to his parents' home. During our first reunion in a long time, I could sense that something had changed in the atmosphere. "Mom, long time no see." My husband greeted her with a smile, and my mother-in-law said, "John, you are getting better. Can you run again?" She smiled at him and said. While smiling at this exchange, my husband began to flip through my mother-in-law's bank book. To his surprise, the money in his mother-in-law's bank book, which we had accumulated after her previous debts had been repaid, was almost completely gone. "What's wrong with this bank book, Mother?" my husband exclaimed in surprise, to which his mother-in-law replied with a slightly embarrassed smile, "You know, I had tea with friends and found a nice little bag. And then I found myself in this mess." She laughed bitterly. With that one word, my husband and I froze in complete surprise. It was as if we had saved money for our mother-in-law's future, and she had spent it happily without a care in the world. My husband couldn't help but say, "Mom, you shouldn't spend it like this. Do you know how much we put our hearts into giving you money for your future?" He said something like that. Seeing my mother-in-law's remorse, we became truly concerned about her future. We suggested that she move in with us to support her life closer to us. When we broached the subject, my mother-in-law's eyes lit up with joy, and she gave up her house and moved into our apartment. Our new shared life together began, and my mother-in-law seemed to enjoy every day of it. The three of us laughed and talked around the table at every meal, and my mother-in-law volunteered to help with the housework, which made life surprisingly easy for both of us. Her upbeat mood was infectious, and our days became brighter and warmer. I said, "Mom, what would you like for lunch today?" I think I'll have udon." "That sounds good." Since I was working remotely, I was in a position to monitor how my mother-in-law spent her money. Since my husband and I, provided her living expenses and my husband managed my mother-in-law's account, there was supposed to be no worry about her spending excessive money. However, we kept a close eye on her, worried that she might spend the money in some way. These days continued, and in no time at all, 6 months passed. One afternoon, while we were relaxing in the living room, the intercom rang. We wondered who it was, and when I answered, I found my sister-in-law, Melissa, standing there. I said, "Melissa, it's been a while. Is my mother there?" I was a little surprised to hear her ask such a question without even saying hello, but I showed her into the living room. "Mom, it's been a while." "Oh, Melissa, what brings you here?" "I just wanted to see your face once in a while." "Thanks, I'm glad you're here. How are you?" "Of course. I'm fine. John is with me. So, do you want to go to lunch with me?" "Sure, let's go." Melissa must have taken my mother-in-law to a restaurant or something. We decided to wait at home. When they came home in the evening, we looked at them and their faces changed. Then Melissa said, "Emma, you are tormenting my mother, aren't you?" I was surprised and could not understand what she was saying. My mother-in-law also looked at me sternly. My husband said, "What are you talking about? There is no way Emma would do such a thing." He immediately took my side, but Melissa would not budge. "John is being deceived too. Mom says she can't go outside and she hears Emma is saying things inside the house." We could only be amazed. Indeed, there were times when my mother-in-law would ask to go shopping and we would refuse because she would waste money. Also, my mom said you were taking her money. I had to admit that this statement surprised me. Did my mother-in-law think so, or did Melissa blow it that way? In any case, it seemed that Melissa and my mother-in-law had joined together in accusing me. "Now, what do you want from me?" I was about to feel like I was bewitched by a fox. What on earth did they want to tell me? I wondered if they just wanted to say something to me. At that moment, my sister-in-law said something I never thought she would say. She said, "I want you to leave our house. I feel like my mother can't really live happily with you. Because I can't believe you treat my mother-in-law so coldly." Her face clouded over. My mother-in-law looked as if she wanted to say something and turned to me. "If you were gone, I would be able to relax and enjoy my time with John and Melissa." I was surprised by her words, but I could not say anything. In fact, they did not know that I had previously paid off her debts for my mother-in-law by cutting into my savings. Looking back, I probably should have made it clear to them at the time that I had not taken it out as our marital savings, but as my own. When I looked at my husband's face, he looked very angry. His hands were clenched and his body was shaking a little. Melissa said, "My mother and I are going to live here together from now on. So, I want you to leave," my sister-in-law said again. Taking a deep breath for a moment, I answered my sister-in-law, "I understand, but I won't get involved in what happens next." After that exchange, my husband and I decided to leave the house. And on the day we moved out, they were surprised to discover one truth. "Looks like you've made arrangements to move out right away after all." "Yes, I have something to tell Melissa." "Yes, what is it?" My husband chuckled and said, "Actually, I'm getting older and I was thinking that I should put the house in Melissa's name." My sister-in-law's eyes sparkled, and she said, "Really? It's going to be my house?" she said excitedly. My husband quietly produced the documents for the change of name and said, "As long as you sign here, that's all right." My sister-in-law happily said, "I can't believe I have my own apartment," and signed it. My husband and I looked at each other stealthily and exchanged smiles at the success of our plan. "Well, it's time to start getting ready to leave." "What, John? Are you really leaving?" "Yes, I've decided to leave too." "Oh, even John is leaving? Do you really have to leave with Emma?" "If I'm not with Emma, I don't feel comfortable either. It's normal for married couples to be together." "I knew you would say that, but then what are we going to do about future house expenses and stuff?" "That's something you'll have to devise and pay for on your own." "Wait a minute. I quit my job because I believed you would support me, okay?" My husband and I could not hide our surprise at my sister-in-law's sudden statement. "If you keep this up, you're going to get me and our mother into a lot of trouble." "That's fine if you can devise a way to live on your own. You have our mother's pension, and if you save a little, you can manage." "Yes, and if you add my pension to that, we can manage. Since you're going to live here, we need to be creative about it." My sister-in-law looked a little satisfied with my mother-in-law's kind words. "Indeed. It's my new home. If I save a little money, I should be able to get by." However, my husband and I laughed inwardly at my sister-in-law saying such a thing, not knowing that the property was a rental. About that time, the movers arrived. We welcomed them and began to move more and more stuff out. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law rolled their eyes at the sight. "What are you doing?" "Getting ready to move out." "Are you taking everything?" "Of course. We bought all this stuff." "Do I have to buy everything new?" "That's right. I wish you had known that and acted accordingly." "Well, we better get going." My husband smiled and said, and we left the house. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law froze in amazement for a while. After a while, my sister-in-law called my husband's cell phone. She said, "Hey, John, what's with the rent bill all of a sudden?" I was a little mistaken. "Could it be that I am not the owner of this house?" "Who told you about that?" "Well, I'm actually renting this house. The document you signed at that time, which was the rental agreement. So, it's only natural that you should be charged for the rent." "Seriously? I didn't know that at all." "It's where you live, so you have to pay the rent. But my salary is not that much compared to you. You may laugh, but Emma actually makes more money than I do." "Oh, no. It's true. She is working hard at a remote company that pays pretty well. That's why we were able to live so comfortably in that apartment." My sister-in-law was so surprised that she was speechless for a while. Next, I heard my mother-in-law's worried voice. "We're so sorry," she said. "I'm really sorry. Could you please reconsider and come back?" My husband responded gently but firmly. "Thank you, Mother. But it's hard for me to go back because of your attitude toward Emma. She is the most important to me. Please take care of the rest." "You will take care of it." After that exchange, I heard various rumors. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law had apparently been forced to look for an apartment after getting tripped up on rent payments. They are now trying to make do in a small apartment that is barely big enough for the two of them to live in, but it is said that they are having financial problems and occasional fights. They are also concerned about the neighbors' eyes on them. John and I have started a new life in our new house. Every day is fun and full of happiness. Hey, Dina, have you washed these sheets properly? They smell like you, said my father-in-law as he laid on the sheets. If we had lived together, I might have experienced such bizarre scenes every day. Just the thought of it gives me the shivers. The divorce that resulted from this living arrangement marked the start of my new life. I am Dina. I am 60 years old and divorced. Others may think differently, but I believe that at 60, I still have a lot ahead of me. I taught myself how to use a computer, which was once a challenge, by reading books. I always want to be an enthusiastic woman who doesn't give up because of her age. Compete with the younger ones? No, I am still young, actually. But even I have faced tough times. The incident happened when I finally finished paying off the house mortgage. This was over a decade ago. I had contributed to the purchase of the house with my husband, Jim, in our 20s, and we had just finished paying off the mortgage. Jim said, "Maybe we should consider living together?" "What do you mean by that?" "You know what I mean. Living with my parents. I've said this many times, but it's a bit difficult." "Why?" "To be honest, I don't think your mother likes me very much. Living together would be hard for both her and me. The way things are now is best." "That might be true, but we won't know unless we try," said Jim. "Once we start living together, it won't be easy to stop, will it? You always seem to shy away from challenges." "Challenges, huh?" Ever since we got married, he often suggested living with his parents. Before marriage, he was firmly against cohabitation, so I felt relieved. But after marriage, he gradually started saying living together might be nice. It's like a scam. I later found out that his mother often told him, "What will you do when we get old?" It's worrying. Before I knew it, Jim started feeling a strange sense of duty, thinking living together is my responsibility as a son, a way of loving my parents. I wish he'd feel that not living together is also his responsibility as a husband. I think it's important to care for his parents, but he keeps insisting on living together even though I don't get along with his mother. Holding back my emotions, my relationship with my thoughtless husband gradually worsened, but he seemed completely unconcerned. As the remaining amount on our house mortgage decreased, his suggestions for living together with his parents intensified. I had ignored his words until then, but this was a warning sign. Feeling an impending sense of crisis, one day, I went to the door at the sound of the intercom and was shocked when I opened it. "Hello," said my smiling mother-in-law and father-in-law standing there. It was 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The sunlight illuminated their smiling faces. It was like a holy scene, but that couldn't be so. Stunned by their sudden visit, I stood there frozen. Then Jim appeared behind me, welcomed them with "Welcome back," and led them inside. "Wait, welcome back? What's going on? Aren't visitors supposed to say excuse us, and the hosts, please come in?" Then Jim's familiar words came to mind. "Let's live together with my parents." This was bad. Confused, I followed them into the house. Then, I saw my mother-in-law carefully examining the china cabinet. "What are you doing?" I asked impulsively. Look at this scratch. It's a pity to buy a new one, but doesn't it bother you, Dina? Aren't you a bit careless? I wish you'd use it more carefully." "What?" "I chose this." I looked at the spot she was observing, but couldn't see any scratches. Maybe she saw the wood grain as scratches because of presbyopia? But I have presbyopia too, and I don't see it that way. However, my mother-in-law has always made such baseless accusations against me. Maybe she just can't like me because I stole her son, but I'm not convinced either. Well, I'll just let it slide as usual. Then I realized I couldn't see my father-in-law. Hearing a noise from upstairs, I went up with a bad feeling. And there he was, lying on my bed instead of my husband's, face down. I screamed in surprise. And without any shame, he said, "Oh, Dina, are the sheets clean? They smell like you," and laughed. Wait. You absolutely can't do this. Please stop that." I blurted out without any hesitation. What do you mean by that? Why are you?" A daughter-in-law being so impudent, shouted my father-in-law. It's not about being a daughter-in-law. Why are you sniffing around in someone else's bed? I raised my voice. I'm just checking if they've been washed properly. There's absolutely no need for that. I strongly argued back. No, it's necessary. As someone who will live in this house, it's an essential check. What? What are you talking about? I really don't understand what you mean, I said, confused. Humph, the thought of living with such a disrespectful daughter-in-law worries me. Living together. I was shocked and lost for words. Suddenly, my husband Jim and my mother-in-law appeared before me. I wondered why it was so noisy. And here you are, said Jim. Jim, your father says he's going to live with us. Is that true? I asked my husband. Yes, exactly as it sounds, Jim answered. What? Really? The house mortgage is going to be finally paid off this month, right? Yes, that's right, but... So, I've decided that we'll live here with my parents. What? Why would you decide such a major thing on your own? No, I've been asking about living together for a while now. I told you firmly oppose it. I can't accept living under the same roof as someone who sniffs other people's sheets. I argued strongly. Did you say that? I clenched my fists, feeling a mix of surprise and anger. Besides, I've been seeing another girl for a while now. So, I don't really need to live with you. What? That's unbelievable. Well, anyone would prefer a young and cute girl over a wife who won't live with her in-laws. I wondered what he was talking about, but there was more to be shocked about. If you don't like it, that's fine. Once the mortgage is paid off, we don't need you anymore, my mother-in-law said with a smile. What? I asked again in shock. That's right. You're no longer needed. Now get out. My father-in-law said, grinning and gesturing as if shooing away a dog. So, I was just a tool to help with mortgage payments to them for a long time. Jim's income alone was uncertain, and both incomes were needed to get a new house and pay off the mortgage quickly. My mother-in-law had endured her son's marriage to me, always hoping for and waiting to be able to live together. Once the mortgage was paid off, she probably thought she could live with her son again. To them, I was useful like a servant until no longer needed. The more I understood the situation, the angrier I became. I regretted not doing anything until it got to that point. But the house was also important to me. There was no reason for me to be cornered like this. But wait a minute. A sudden idea flashed in my mind, and a light shone in my heart that was filled with despair and irritation. All right, let's all live together. What? My quick response surprised Jim and my mother-in-law the most. They might have thought I would leave easily, but they were taken aback by my unexpected answer. A life with a husband, his affair partner, and in-laws sounds fun, doesn't it? My mother-in-law and Jim's reactions to my statement were so funny that I laughed. But of course, that was just a joke. Who would live together? Of course, I'm leaving, I said. They probably didn't expect me to leave so easily. They must have thought I would beg to stay. Jim was unsettled until the moment I left the house, but I ignored him and eventually finalized our divorce. About a month later, having lost the house and enjoying my free time in a hotel after the divorce, I received a call from my ex-mother-in-law. I really need to see you, she said, though it seemed troublesome. I had a hunch, so I agreed to meet her. When I arrived at the cafe for our appointment, there sat my former in-laws with gloomy faces. As soon as they saw me, my mother-in-law tearfully said, "Dina, thank you for coming." Well, the whole family gathered. What do you need from your ex-daughter-in-law? We received a notice yesterday about the division of property. Of course, we're divorced, so we need to discuss property division properly, right? Did you think I wouldn't respond? What? Well, but the situation has changed now. The situation? I repeated the question, and Jim's dejected figure seemed even more disheartened. Jim's company has finally gone bankrupt. Is that so? I thought that might happen. I clapped my hands and said with a smile, I knew it. Dina, what do you mean by I knew it? Jim's income has been decreasing year by year, and last month, there was a delay in his salary payment. That's a sign of a company going under. Such a thing happened. Jim, why didn't you say anything? My mother-in-law's face was filled with anger towards her son. Jim let out a small leap and looked frightened. Well, I never thought the company would fail. People usually notice such things. You're just ignorant, I sharply pointed out, and Jim looked up in surprise, saying what? Immediately, I asked everyone, so, you all gathered here to tell me that Jim has lost his job and can't contribute to the property division? Surely that's not the case, right? Everyone was at a loss for words. Well, Jem was the first to speak up. Our house burned down. What? The house, it burned down. I get that. But how did it happen? It was Dad's cigarette. Huh. Ha ha ha. Living with your parents led to a huge loss. Huh? That stuff? I couldn't help but burst into laughter. I had anticipated Jim losing his job. When divorcing, I thought to myself, I don't want to support such an irresponsible, unemployed husband, and living with his parents would bring more problems. There are also issues when caring for the elderly. So, divorcing was the best choice for me. But I never imagined that his father would burn down the house. This could be the perfect opportunity to speak. A mischievous idea awakened in me. Haha, I'm sorry, but it must be really tough for you. Since Dad and Mom left their home, they have nowhere to live and we don't know what to do. Jim said, truly unemployed and homeless now. Please stop saying things like that. I'm also living in a hotel at the moment, so I'm practically homeless too. But that will change soon as I'm about to get my own place. Really? Everyone was surprised at my news of purchasing a new home. Just the reaction I expected. You know that high-rise apartment near the station? I'm moving there soon. A high-rise apartment. Jim's and my in-laws' faces changed completely. Maybe a high-rise apartment is everyone's dream? For me, I chose it just because it has good security. I wasn't interested in higher floors and chose a lower one to avoid the stress of waiting for elevators. What? We want to live there, too. Dina, can we live with you? Please. Forget everything that happened before. Really, Dina? I'm asking too. As expected, my in-laws shamelessly asked to live in the ex-daughter-in-law's house. Their audacity was astounding. Could it be that my father-in-law planned to burn down the apartment as well? I'd like to help, but after all, I was just an unnecessary existence for you all. Just a wallet for mortgage payments. As I spoke sarcastically, my in-laws hurriedly started praising me. We've always admired your housekeeping skills. You certainly brighten up the home. You're thoughtful and beautiful. In contrast, our son was spoiled and grew up to be unemployed, and we can't handle him. Their only son, my ex-husband, was speechless watching them. Even a beloved son becomes unnecessary if he lacks the ability to support them. Such cruel parental thinking. Hey, living with so many people might not be bad, I said, and Jim and his parents looked surprised. It might be lively. Dina, what do you mean? Jim asked. Oh, I mean just what I said. As I smiled kindly, everyone's faces brightened. It's just, it might be a bit awkward to live with a divorced husband again. As I said this, my mother-in-law responded, Oh, that's true. Don't worry about it. Jim doesn't need to live with you. She said cheerfully. What? Jim was shocked. That's right. Jim can live somewhere else. We can live together with you. My father-in-law chimed in. Wait a minute, Dad, Mom. Why are you leaving me out? Jim protested. Because we can pay Dina for food with our pension, but you can't, his father explained. So, they planned to possibly live in the high-rise apartment and only paid for meals. I was about to say that, but chose to remain silent and observe the family discord I had instigated. Go ahead, fools, play right into my hands. Then, if you both are receiving pensions, you should find another place to live. We can't afford such wastefulness without a job, not knowing what our future holds. What future are you talking about? You're already in your twilight years. You're an elderly couple with unsteady feet. How rude. We're still healthy. If you're healthy, find a job and use that income for the future. I can't even take a bath or go to job interviews in my current state. Clean yourself in the river. You're always thinking only for yourself. What? You're saying that when you don't do it yourself, you're a failure, an arsonist. Who's the failure? You, the useless son, unemployed and worthless. We don't need you. We're cutting ties. That's fine. I'd rather not have parents who disregard their son. During this family argument, tension filled the air between Jim and his parents. My mother-in-law, in a soft voice, tried to calm my father-in-law. You don't really mean to cut ties, do you? However, Jim's firm stance only fueled his father's anger further, and he refused to retract his decision to sever ties with him. Moreover, my father-in-law jokingly said to me, "This makes the room bigger, huh?" His words hinted that he had fully accepted a new life in the high-rise apartment, planning to live in my home. I asked with a bit of sarcasm, "Can't you misunderstanding something?" Everyone looked at me in surprise. The size of the room hasn't changed from the beginning. I have no intention of living with you all, I calmly stated. What do you mean by that, Dina? Asked my father-in-law. I replied indifferently, it doesn't have any deep meaning. I just said that having many people around would make life lively. Nothing more, nothing less. At that moment, my mother-in-law objected, "What? But from your words, it felt like you were considering living with us." I raised my voice slightly. It's quite interesting to see you two so easily choose life in a high-rise apartment over your son. Jim always disregarded my opinions and wanted to live with you, but what about now? Isn't it time to realize how unreasonable your proposals have been, Jim? Can't you see the reality even after your house has burned down? Then Jim looked at his parents with deep anger. Indeed, you're right, Dina. I believed in giving back to my parents, but it seems they never thought the same of me. Wait, Jim. My in-laws couldn't hide their surprise at his statement. Jim, I was wrong. Let's forget the estrangement. So, Father, you just want to rely on your son because you can't live in my house, right? What? No, that's not it. Do you really think so? You seem clearly unsettled. As I smiled and said this, my father-in-law began to panic. Seeing this, Jim's anger became more apparent. I don't need such parents. Estrangement it is. Jim shouted angrily, and his parents begged frantically, "Please listen," but he wouldn't hear them. Instead, he turned to me. "Thanks to you, I've come to realize I want to start over." What, really? Yes, I'm serious. You did all this to wake me up, right? Haha, stop it. That's too convenient for you. What, why? I just thought it might be fun to see someone who abandoned his wife to get along with his parents now struggling with them. What? You're just an object of property division to me now. What? Property division? You really plan to demand that in this situation? This situation? That's irrelevant. It's obvious. I signed the divorce papers quickly to leave the house, but property division can still be claimed after divorce, so I intend to take it seriously. Wait, hey, don't you love me anymore? What charm could someone without an address or a stable job possibly have? Your head's empty too. I can't believe it. Later, unable to reconcile with me, Jim raged at his parents. This is all your fault. Before the police arrived, I left the scene. And then, I did exactly as I said and pursued the property division. Honestly, it wasn't a large amount, but it marked the complete end of my relationship with Jim. Jim, now without an address or job, struggled with reduced savings due to the property division and became estranged from his parents. He seems to be living a wandering life, moving from various places, doing odd jobs daily, staying in cheap lodgings, sometimes even sleeping in parks. Unable to find stable work due to his age, he's leading a nomadic life. His parents didn't repair their relationship with their son and decided to live on their pension alone, essentially disowning him. They have always been a couple only concerned with themselves. Meanwhile, I have been living a relatively affluent life due to my investment activities I started before the divorce. Recently, I began attending a local programming school to improve my computer skills. I'm the only one in my age group, but I'm surrounded by children, making me feel like I have many grandchildren. Though I never had children, I find warmth in being surrounded by children in this way. A primary school girl named Tracy seems interested in knitting, and I sometimes teach her during breaks at the school. Watching her and other children join in knitting together brings a smile to my face. Despite a life full of ups and downs, I plan to continue living a life that's true to myself. My son, who earns a high income, and you, who spend every day without working, are not compatible. My son and I are planning to live here from now on, so please leave immediately. It happened on a day when my husband, who usually stays in his room, had gone out for a bit. Suddenly, the intercom at my house buzzed incessantly, and when I opened the door, my mother-in-law was standing there, looking excited. Taken aback by this sudden visit, I asked, "Hello, mother-in-law. What brings you here at this time?" Before anything, answer the intercom immediately when it rings. Making me wait is quite rude, don't you think? I'm sorry, I was a bit tied up with work. It's hard to believe you do any real work at home. I bet you're just lazing around, aren't you? That's not true. I'm genuinely working. I don't want to hear excuses. You live a comfortable life here every day, yet benefit from my son's high salary. I think it's unfair. We intend to start a new life here, just my son and I. Could you find somewhere else to go? She pulled out a piece of paper from an envelope she was holding and handed it to me with a smug smile. Here, take a look. The paper read divorce papers. Moreover, my husband's section was already filled out. Wait, are these divorce papers? Yes. He's also come to realize he can't be with you any longer. So, sign this and leave this place immediately. She looked incredibly proud of herself, perhaps relishing the shock she imagined I'd be in. But I wasn't as flustered as she thought. With a slight smile, I promptly signed the divorce papers. Inwardly, I couldn't help but chuckle at how much she misunderstood. She didn't know anything. My name is Nancy. I work from home, hustling as a freelance writer and editor. I used to work for a publishing company, so I've leveraged that experience to maintain a stable income even now. While working at the publishing company, it wasn't uncommon to work late into the night or even on weekends. But the compensation was good, and thanks to my salary, bonuses, and copyright-related rewards from the publishing world, I managed to save a considerable amount. Thanks to that, despite the instability of freelancing, I've been able to live comfortably. I met my husband, Dylan, while working together at the publishing company. He was an aspiring writer, chasing his dreams, and I supported and resonated with his passion. Gradually, my feelings of appreciation turned into love, leading to our marriage. Initially, our married life was fulfilling as we supported each other's careers. Upon getting married, I started freelancing, switching to working from home. Until then, I believed both my husband and in-laws understood and appreciated my career and income. However, as time passed, it seemed their misunderstandings about my work grew. My in-laws held traditional values. In their generation, the concept of working from home wasn't common. They also perceived freelancing as unstable, especially compared to my husband's regular employment, and thus devalued my work. Additionally, Dylan began telling his parents how successful he had become as a renowned writer. Because of this, the cold attitude of my in-laws towards me intensified. Every time we met, they'd sarcastically say things like, "Oh, look, it's Nancy who doesn't seem to work much. What brings you here today? Looking for a job recommendation? Mother-in-law, if you're concerned about our living expenses, I apologize, but I'm earning well, so there's no need to worry." Well, you sound quite confident. Maybe you should show more gratitude to Dylan. Without him, you'd be in trouble, wouldn't you? My mother-in-law had old-fashioned values. In her generation, women typically managed the household while men worked outside. Thus, seeing me work from home, she likely assumed I was shirking housework. The story paints a picture of generational and cultural differences, misunderstandings, and challenges within a family. Mother-in-law, freelancing means that you can earn a good income even without going to an office and working from home. Nowadays, with technological advancements, we can work from anywhere, and my job falls into that category. However, my mother-in-law responded angrily, "All you do is talk back. You're such an unpleasant daughter-in-law. It just doesn't look natural for a young woman to be messing around with a computer at home all day." Lately, these kinds of conversations had been recurring, and I was honestly getting a bit tired of it. I swallowed down my retort, thinking, not this topic again. Inwardly, I thought, in reality, I'm the main breadwinner, and I handle most of the housework, but I didn't say it out loud. In the beginning, her occasional complaints only occurred when Dylan wasn't around, but recently, she's been saying them more openly, especially during family dinners at her house, which felt more like a session to criticize me than anything else. Despite being invited, only Dylan's portion of food would be on the table. There was no seat for me, making it very uncomfortable. Moreover, she seemed to badmouth me to other relatives, and I could hear whispered comments, which were very unpleasant. I was often taken aback by her and my father-in-law's attitudes, but Dylan's silence also irritated me. On top of that, they saw Dylan as a successful author and relied on him for money, often asking him to buy things. This was funded by the money I earned. Initially, it was a small amount, but lately, I noticed we were spending almost $2,000 monthly for his parents. I decided to tell Dylan, "I want you to stop giving my earnings to your parents without asking me." But his response was colder than I expected. "You're earning money while relaxing at home, right? It's easy money, so why not let my parents use a bit of it?" Wait, Dylan, do you really think I'm just lounging around at home to earn my money? I couldn't hide my shock at his words. It felt like the last straw. I felt betrayed, confused, and sad. Even though there were challenges with his parents and our differing backgrounds, I believed Dylan was on my side, which helped me persevere. That reassurance was shattered by his words. Dylan, who I thought understood my feelings and efforts, ended up joining those who mocked me behind my back. I remembered our first date when he passionately talked about his work, shared dreams, and values. I was drawn to his enthusiasm and sincerity. But lately, he seemed to have forgotten his dreams and passion and spent his days aimlessly, often engrossed in games. And that figure was completely different from the person he was when we first met. Games aren't bad in themselves, but his obsession made him neglect his passion for writing, which saddened and angered me. I started questioning if I should continue my future with Dylan. If my relationship with Dylan continued, what would become of my life? Even when I tried to imagine a future with him, I could only see a bleak future. Thus, I decided to divorce him and secretly began looking for a new place to live. I searched online for apartments suitable for singles and visited a few properties for viewing. Focusing on apartments with a quiet living environment and strong security, I finally decided on one property. One day, while Dylan, who usually played games in his room, was out, my mother-in-law visited. Surprised by her sudden visit, I opened the door. Without waiting, she sat on the living room sofa and bluntly said, "Nancy, you should leave this place." "What are you saying all of a sudden?" I was too shocked to respond. "Isn't it obvious? You're bad at housework, and even after Dylan became a popular author, you haven't changed. Above all, you can't even work properly. But I've told you many times that it's a misunderstanding, haven't I?" However, my mother-in-law interrupted me, smiling gently. "I plan to live here and support Dylan. Taking care of him is much better than looking after that noisy old lady." By noisy old lady, do you mean Dylan's grandmother? Yes, that woman who is technically my mother-in-law. Even though I've done so much for her, she always finds fault. She shows no gratitude, and I'm fed up. If I live here, I can take care of Dylan, and he can focus on his work without any hindrance. Isn't that wonderful? With that, she pulled out a piece of paper from the envelope she held. "So, would you please leave this house immediately?" As I listened to her words, I accepted the divorce papers she held out. They had been signed by Dylan. Did Dylan really sign this? A little while ago, I suggested to Dylan that it might be better for both of you to get a divorce. It seems he was fed up with you two because he signed it without hesitation, she said with a playful tone. Everything that followed happened so quickly. I took my pre-packed bags and promptly decided to move to a new apartment. During the move, I also managed to file the divorce papers, and a new life began. My new life was more smooth and comfortable than I had expected. My small apartment had only essential furniture and appliances, and its simplicity seemed to boost my focus. I was free from complications, and each day was calm and peaceful. I'd wake up to natural light streaming in through the window and the sound of birds chirping in the distance. I would get up whenever I wanted, eat breakfast, and plan my day. When I start working, I get so engrossed that time would fly by. It felt heavenly not having to worry about the gaze and expectations of Dylan and my parents-in-laws, and to be able to work at my own pace. One day, as I was engrossed in work at my desk, my smartphone vibrated. It was a call from Dylan. I hesitated but decided to answer. "Nancy, please come back right now." A desperate Dylan pleaded. "Why would you want me to come back all of a sudden?" To be honest, my parents found out I lied about being a popular author. I'm under immense pressure now. They're even talking about moving in, expecting to live off my earnings. So, please, can you come back? I see, but returning isn't that simple. You chose to sign the divorce papers, didn't you? So did I. We're not on the same path anymore. So deal with your issues yourself. It's none of my business. His voice was a mix of desperation and sadness. But I believe we should be together. Please come back. Firmly, I responded, "We've chosen different lives now." I could hear Dylan taking a deep breath on the other end. I understand, but since the divorce, there have been many troubles, and it's costing me a lot. I need assistance with expenses like the care fees for our parents and compensations for the chaos it caused. Why are you suddenly talking about this? I think your decisions played a part in ruining all of my plans. How dare you? Remember when we were married how you and your parents mocked me? I didn't want to say this, but now you seem like an enemy. Your financial troubles arise because you don't work properly. Find another way to sort it out. I wish you wouldn't rely on me for everything. With that, I ended the call. Despite numerous subsequent calls from Dylan, I blocked him and changed my number. A few months later, I happened to pass by where his house used to be. Instead of his house, there was now just an empty land. A nearby resident told me about the recent disputes at his place, with police getting involved at times. The neighbor's words seemed to contain all the emotions of the situation. As she said, "You must have gone through a lot, too. There must have been a lot of turmoil leading to the loss of his house." I stood there for a while, reflecting on our past. The unexpected outcome might be some kind of karma. Dylan's little lie had had such a significant impact, more unbelievable than any story he might have written. From then on, I pledged to myself to live honestly, expressing my feelings and thoughts without lies or pretense. No matter how challenging things get, I recognize the importance of conveying the truth and cherishing genuine feelings. Did you receive the luggage from my parents and sister? From now on, we'll be supporting them. Over the phone, Robert declared this as if it was no big deal. As usual, it seems that Robert was prioritizing his own interests. It appears that I was merely seen as a convenient source of financial benefit. That's when I decided to cut ties with Robert and his family. Until now, I had swallowed my bitterness out of love for him, but this situation has changed my feelings. The handover is complete. I just sent my luggage to my new residence in the high-rise apartment. I responded cheerily to Robert. "A high-rise apartment," Robert muttered, then lost his words for a moment. I am Sherry Irving. At 55, I work for a real estate company. Real estate sales is a daily battle. Especially in the beginning, I faced countless challenges, starting with acquiring new clients. Being in a regional branch, I had to find new clients interested in stocks. Despite visiting many homes, I often faced rejection. Sometimes, I was met with harsh words, leading to disappointment. But by persistently continuing my sales efforts, I gradually increased my clientele. Currently, I live with my husband, Robert. We met in college and later on got married. Of course, Robert was the one who proposed. Our only son, Max, is now an adult and employed. Due to his job, he currently lives a few hours away by train, which makes me feel a bit lonely. However, when he has long vacations, he comes home, and I eagerly await those times. My in-laws live relatively close, so it's a short distance from our place. There, my in-laws and my sister-in-law, a total of 3 people reside. My sister-in-law, 5 years my senior, is an avid Idol fan. She travels for concerts from New York in the east to LA in the west. She stays at home to secure funds for this purpose. Due to her strong attachment to idols, she has no intention of marrying. Their home, a 40-year-old 2-room rental apartment, shows signs of aging everywhere. And since it's located on the 4th floor without an elevator, stair climbing becomes a significant effort. However, Robert often says, "I'm going to visit my parents," suggesting he has a good relationship with my in-laws. I've lost my parents and don't have the opportunity to do so, so I don't oppose his visits. My relationship with my in-laws is a separate matter. They are still healthy, and my sister-in-law is there, so I wasn't particularly worried. That's when I, optimistically unprepared, faced an unexpected situation. As soon as Robert returned home, he approached me, seemingly eager to say something. It seems the apartment where my parents live is going to be demolished. They've been asked to vacate. I was surprised by this sudden news. So sudden? What will we do now? I asked urgently, but Robert calmly replied, "Well, it'll work out somehow. There are 3 adults after all. But can you hurry up with dinner?" With that, Robert went to his room to change. I was flustered. If my in-laws turned to us for help, it would be a big problem. They have always been cold towards me. This was clear from the first time we met 30 years ago, when Robert and I started dating and visited his parents' home. "Nice to meet you. I look forward to getting to know you." I greeted them with a smile under the watchful eyes of my in-laws. But his parents and sister just stared at me. I was confused about how to respond. In the midst of this, my mother-in-law sighed heavily and said, "I heard Robert had a girlfriend, but she's nothing like I imagined. She has no charm and looks poor." What? I couldn't hide my confusion at my mother-in-law's sudden remark. Unable to counter, my sister-in-law joined in. "She really looks plain and poor. Not quite right to be Robert's wife." Exactly. I looked to Robert for support, but my hopes were quickly dashed. I've dated glamorous beauties before, but I think someone like her will meet my needs better. Robert said this with a smile. "Really, Sherry, you don't seem popular, right? It looks like you'd do anything Robert asks, so he won't leave you." My sister-in-law nodded and responded, "I should have ended things with Robert then. But back then, I was deeply in love with him and couldn't see the reality before my eyes. I misunderstood Robert's terrible behavior as an attempt to make his family accept me. As a result, we got married, and that's when our troubles began. After a while, my mother-in-law started giving orders. "Hey, the microwave is acting up. Go buy a new one." She would suddenly demand over the phone. Not knowing what to do, I rushed to an electronics store. I bought the microwave my mother-in-law specified and delivered it to their house. But there was no word of thanks. "The microwave has arrived, so your job here is done. Go back home." My mother-in-law dismissed me with those words. Naturally, I was not reimbursed for the microwave. Afterward, she continued to issue various commands. If I ignored her orders, she would surely report it to Robert. And in turn, Robert would raise his voice at me. "You're part of this family, right? Show some respect and don't spare on the expenses." This type of interaction repeated itself, and I reluctantly endured. My sister-in-law also had similar demands. "I'm going to my favorite's concert. Book a train for me," she would suddenly call. And the requested dates were always last minute. Naturally, it was often hard to find available seats on the train. When I reported the situation, my sister-in-law would immediately become furious. How can you be so incompetent? Unbelievable. I'll have to go the day before the concert then, but find a hotel. Since it's your fault this time, you're paying. She would dump her dissatisfaction on me and hang up unilaterally. Eventually, I had to pay for my sister-in-law's travel and accommodation expenses from my salary. My father-in-law was entirely under the thumb of my mother and sister-in-law. They're right. Your opinion is wrong. And by the way, we're out of liquor. Go buy some. This was his regular phrase. The unreasonable demands from my in-laws gradually wore me down. And the problem wasn't just with my in-laws. Robert himself was a significant issue. One Monday night, when I returned home, Robert was sitting on the sofa in the living room. The room was dim and no lights were on. Feeling something was off, I asked Robert, "What happened?" Without making eye contact, he replied, "I quit my job today. I got into an argument with my boss and submitted my resignation." Really? From what I heard, the resignation was accepted on the spot. Normally, at least a 1-month notice period was required for resignation. However, it seems that Robert's resignation was accepted immediately. Even after hearing this, my doubts didn't clear. What are you planning to do now? How will we manage the living expenses? Do you have any prospects for a new job? I bombarded him with questions. Then Robert answered indifferently, "I'll start looking for a job tomorrow. For the time being, can you support us financially?" I tried to counter his illogical statement, but Robert glared at me and snapped, "By marrying me, you were freed from your lonely single life. Can't you be useful at times like this?" Robert was sitting in front of the TV, looking displeased. When he gets like this, he never accepts anyone else's opinion. Sometimes he even lashes out at objects. There was a time he damaged the refrigerator. It's very inconvenient when things get broken. Reluctantly, I had no choice but to reply, "Okay." Since then, Robert has yet to find re-employment. He occasionally leaves the house, but it's unclear if he's actually job hunting. And since Robert stopped contributing financially, I've been forced to economize, including cutting back on food expenses. Despite this, Robert has a big appetite and claims to be a gourmet. When I serve affordable meals, he complains and consumes everything, including my portion. "Are you treating me like this because I have no income? Serve dishes with more meat. Don't you feel sorry for me having such a stingy wife?" Though I wanted to argue back, I couldn't speak up because I still had feelings for Robert. "I'm sorry," I apologized, while feeling utterly exhausted inside. On that day, the doorbell rang, and I stepped outside. Yes, 2 men, ready to bring in packages, stood before me. "This is the residence of Mr. Irving, right? We have some packages to deliver here." They informed me and started to bring the packages into the house. "Could you please wait a moment? Are you sure there's no mistake?" I hurriedly stopped them. With puzzled looks, they answered, "We got clear instructions from the homeowner, Mr. Robert Irving. It's difficult for us to proceed if you obstruct us." They began to bring in one box after another. I couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. I immediately called Robert. Fortunately, he answered the phone right away. "Robert, movers are bringing in loads of boxes right now." "What's all this stuff?" Robert's response was unexpected. "Did you receive the luggage from my parents and sister? From now on, we'll be supporting them." Over the phone, Robert declared this as if it was no big deal. "What do you mean by that?" "They're being kicked out of their apartment. We have space here, so I suggested they move in with us. Plus, I'll get a share of Dad's pension, so it'll be like pocket money for me." As usual, it seems that Robert was prioritizing his own interests. The fact that he regarded the money received as mere pocket money was astonishing. Living with my in-laws will undoubtedly add further strain to our finances. Yet, there was no sign that Robert intended to contribute to this household. It appears that I was merely seen as a convenient source of financial benefit. That's when I decided to cut ties with Robert and his family. Until now, I had swallowed my bitterness out of love for him, but this situation has changed my feelings. At the moment I solidified my decision, Robert continued, So, how long will it take to unpack? He asked as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. How? I couldn't hide my surprise, but Robert seemed oblivious. He continued as if it were a matter of course. It's about the unpacking. Mom and sis are getting old, so they can't handle the hard work, right? You'll take care of the unpacking while we stay at a hotel. I felt anger at Robert's suggestion that I handle all my in-laws' belongings alone. He should regret this. After some thought, I replied, I think it will take about a week. Robert's voice suddenly revealed his dissatisfaction. A week? Isn't that clearly too much time? You're really inefficient. I'll convince Mom and the others, so make sure everything is sorted within a week. I'll send the transfer form for the moving expenses later. Don't forget to receive it. With that, he ended the call. His attitude in asking for favors was truly infuriating. I'll make him realize soon, I muttered quietly, and after a week passed, I received a call from Robert. Is all the unpacking done? Mom and the others will be back soon. Do you have the payment slip for the moving expenses? Robert was talking cheerily for some reason. I could hear the voices of my in-laws in the background. Now we have a handy house helper nearby. You'll follow our instructions, right? There's no salary, but we're family, so that's fine. Mom, I think that's a bit direct. But she's not really family, so being a house helper might be just right for her. My sister-in-law said, laughing, because she's a fake family member. My father-in-law agreed. These people were not my family. They were just strangers from the start. So I responded with a smile. The handover is complete. I just sent my luggage to my new residence in the high-rise apartment. I responded cheerily to Robert. A high-rise apartment. Robert muttered, then lost his words for a moment. In fact, right after I got the call from Robert a week ago, I took action immediately. First, I explained everything to Max. Max was quite furious and decided to stand by me. And there was something Robert didn't know. I had actually bought a room in a high-rise apartment for investment purposes. The real estate company I work for deals with investment apartments for high-income earners. In my second year of working, I took out a long-term mortgage and acquired a room in a high-rise apartment. The room has one bedroom and is not very spacious. And since it was on the third floor, it was relatively affordable in that building. Still, purchasing the apartment was a major decision. I am proud that I made a brave choice. After buying the room, I quickly put it up for rent, and until now, the rental income had been covering the mortgage repayment successfully. However, the previous tenant had just moved out, and the income had stopped. So, I decided it was the perfect opportunity to move. After I calmly explained the situation, Robert asked a question. Why will you be the only one living in a high-rise apartment? That's unfair. What's going to happen to the place we used to live? Urgency laced Robert's voice. I knew why he was anxious. After all, the place we lived in together was a rental, and unemployed Robert had no means to pay the rent. Moreover, my in-laws were living on their pensions. Compared to a rental apartment, the rent for the house we used to live in was significantly higher. Plus, my sister-in-law spent all her earnings on chasing idols and probably had little savings. I pretended to know nothing and answered, if the whole family lives here, there shouldn't be any problem. The lease is in Robert's name, so there's no need for any changes, and there shouldn't be any issues, right? Well, you are currently jobless, but I'm sure you'll find something soon, so no worries. Despite my cheerful response, I could sense the disturbance on the other end of the phone. Wait, this house isn't our property? The rent seems to be quite a lot. How much is it per month? My mother-in-law was clearly anxious. I've spent it all on idols, so I can't pay any rent. And what do you mean Robert is jobless? How have you been managing the living expenses then? The pension I receive isn't nearly enough to pay rent for such a big place. My father-in-law was also confused. My in-laws and sister-in-law united in throwing accusations at Robert. They must have reached their breaking point. Finally, Robert exploded and yelled at me. Why are you deciding everything on your own? Get ready because we're getting a divorce. I responded calmly. I don't mind getting a divorce. In fact, I'm already consulting with a lawyer. You should be receiving the notifications soon. I answered with a calm smile. What? Robert exclaimed in astonishment. Are you really okay with that? If you divorce Robert, you'll be all alone. You'll have a lonely old age. My sister-in-law also pressed me similarly. It seems my determination got through to them. Feeling at a disadvantage, my mother-in-law said to me, "There's no need to divorce. We are one family. As long as you comply, like before, there won't be any problems." My father-in-law joined in. "Don't be stubborn, come back home." I despised how they changed their tune when their position worsened. They needed me, and without me, they would struggle to live. As these thoughts went through my mind, Robert said, "Our family is very generous. Be grateful, apologize, and come back." My in-laws and sister-in-law agreed, especially my sister-in-law, who inappropriately said, "I'll live in the high-rise apartment instead, so vacate that room quickly." I had no intention of returning, so I made it clear. I absolutely refuse. Robert and the others are just after my assets and free labor. It's impossible for me to return to such an environment. Criticism came flying from them, getting all high and mighty just because I'm silent. Don't say whatever you want. What will happen to Max if we actually get a divorce? Won't his chances of getting married decrease if he's from a broken home? Robert said gleefully. He loved Max. He was his beloved son. My mother-in-law also loved Max very much. Let's live together when Max comes back. Ignore this person, she said cheerfully. My father and sister-in-law seemed happy too. I hope their expectations shatter into pieces. I've told Max everything, so he's on my side now. He looks down on you, Robert, and might not want to see you again. I spoke cheerfully. Robert, surprised, said, "I thought Max loved me," in a disappointed tone. Since Robert used to say that Max was the apple of his eye, this situation must be particularly hard to accept. My mother-in-law muttered, "Max," while seeming to tear up. My sister and father-in-law were silent, unable to say anything. At that moment, Robert suddenly remembered. "By the way, did you make sure to pay for the moving expenses?" My mother-in-law also recalled, "Yes, that's true. Why would they think that the oppressed party should pay for the moving expenses? Especially when divorce was being discussed." So I calmly replied, "I haven't paid. It was supposed to be several $1,000s, right? How do you plan to come up with such a large amount?" Robert's voice was trembling. "I thought you were going to cover those costs. I have no money and can't possibly pay. Just take care of the moving expenses somehow." My mother and sister-in-law were in a panic. "What are you planning to do, Robert? We don't have any money. We just bought new furniture, too." I bought my idol merchandise on credit, thinking I would live in a spacious room. I intended to have Sherry cover the costs. My sister-in-law exclaimed in a voice of despair. After that, Robert and my in-laws continued to shift blame onto each other. Continuing this conversation wouldn't lead to anything productive. "Please communicate through the lawyer from now on." I stated this and ended the call. Then I quietly blocked the numbers of Robert and my in-laws. Subsequently, Robert and I went through with the divorce, but it was a contentious process. I think Robert hoped to cancel the divorce and continue receiving financial support since he was jobless, including for the moving expenses. However, his plan fell apart when his beloved son, Max, began to look down on him. During the consultations at the law firm, Max, who stayed with me for a while, declared to Robert and the others, "My family is now only my mother. I cannot call people who cause her pain, like my father and grandparents, my family. After the divorce, I will be with my mother." Max resolutely rejected Robert and my in-laws. This confused Robert and my mother-in-law. They turned to me, saying, "Can't you persuade Max? You started the problem and involved the family. Aren't you aware of the trouble you're causing?" I declared firmly, "What are you trying to say? Should I endure like before, playing the role of a maid? You don't work and don't lift a finger at home, and you plan to let your parents and sister live with us, pressuring me? I won't return to that place. Perhaps my voice was too loud, as Robert and my in-laws were taken aback. Calmly, I continued, "My family is only Max. You and the others are now strangers. I will not be involved or support you financially anymore." Robert and my in-laws looked displeased. With my firm decision and the lawyer's persuasion, the divorce was finalized. However, Robert still contacted me through the lawyer several times afterward. "I can't find a job and might be evicted. I covered the moving expenses with a loan, but the interest is piling up. It's the end if this continues. Please, can we start over? I'll even kneel if necessary." The lawyer said that not only Robert but also my in-laws were desperately reaching out. "Please help. We need financial support. Robert doesn't work and just watches TV all day. I'm too weak to manage the housework properly. Can you at least take care of me? The rent and daily expenses are overwhelming, and it's difficult to pay." My sister-in-law also pleaded, "It's unfair that only you live comfortably in the high-rise apartment while I'm left behind. Let me live there too." Even after the divorce, they seemed to expect me to comply just because I was the ex-wife. I politely refused their requests through the lawyer. If this continues, Robert and my in-laws will only limit their own paths. I continue to live in the high-rise apartment. What has changed is the frequency of my conversations. After separating from Robert, Max and I have been talking more. In fact, Max has a girlfriend and they plan to visit me soon. The possibility of our family growing excites me. I am filled with happiness while searching the internet for a restaurant that Max and his girlfriend would enjoy. My name is Amy. It's been almost 3 years since I got married to my husband, Michael. We are both satisfied with our current jobs and consider having children in the future, but for now, we are dedicated to our careers. Since the beginning of our marriage, Michael has been supporting the household chores, not always equally, but he helps. When I have to work late, he prepares dinner using microwave food, and on weekends, he takes on the washing up. I am not bad at household chores, and I feel our relationship is appropriate as it is. However, recently I have been feeling a small dissatisfaction. It is because Michael has started visiting his parents' house frequently. Previously, we sometimes visited his parents' house together, but lately, he has been going there overnight after work or visiting alone on weekends. The reason is probably due to the death of his father. 6 months ago, his father passed away, and since then, his mother, who used to live with him, has been alone. Michael's brother and his wife, concerned about this, decided to live with his mother, but it seems that their living together has not been going smoothly. Initially, I was also worried about his mother, so when Michael's brother and his wife started living with her, I was very grateful. It was obvious that his mother was very depressed, and everyone hoped she would cheer up a little. After his father's death, when Michael's brother and his wife started living with her, I also visited occasionally to support her. Gradually, his mother began to regain her usual brightness, and there was a time when it seemed that her daily life was returning to normal. But after that, the situation gradually turned ominous. His mother, who used to take care of his father, still had a nurturing nature and started taking care of her grandchildren. Michael's brother and his wife have a daughter, and they were not particularly strict about parenting. But his mother's intervention was quite forceful. She would become furious if meals were not finished completely and would lock the child in a room if she did not follow her instructions. Even when Michael's wife asked her to stop, she would not accept it, saying, "This is discipline. If you don't teach properly, she can't become a good adult." And she would not bend her stance. When I first heard about this incident from my sister-in-law, I was honestly surprised. I wondered if discipline really needed to be that severe. However, since I do not live with them, I felt I had no right to say anything, and I just listened to my sister-in-law's troubles. Meanwhile, one day, my sister-in-law reached her limit and made a suggestion to my mother-in-law. "I will take care of my husband and daughter's household chores, so I ask you, mother, to only take care of your own part." For my sister-in-law, who originally disliked interference from others, this proposal must have required great courage. With the support of Michael's brother, My mother-in-law initially agreed, but since their house is not a duplex completely, it was difficult to completely divide the household chores. Eventually, his mother started interfering with Michael's brother and his wife's household chores again. She entered their room without permission to clean and threw away clothes their daughter liked because they were old. She also ruined my sister-in-law's fancy clothes by washing them as usual. My sister-in-law must have been angry inside but suppressed it and indirectly asked her to stop. Moving around makes me feel better. My mother-in-law said somewhat oppressively, but my sister-in-law's feelings were completely ignored. My sister-in-law did not feel any effort from my mother-in-law to understand her emotions deeply, and her anxiety and irritation continued to be overlooked. Subsequent events also took place, completely ignoring my sister-in-law's plans and intentions. Despite my sister-in-law's carefully considered meal menus, my mother-in-law prioritized her own preferences and, without warning, purchased multiple lunches on her own. She also intervened in selecting clothes for Michael's brother and his daughter, choosing items that did not suit her taste or style. The clothes chosen by his mother were not usually fashionable but rather were often cheap sale items. His 5-year-old daughter, who had begun to develop her own opinions on clothes, showed no interest in his mother's selection. Initially, Michael's brother and his wife tried to accept the situation calmly, but over time his mother's dissatisfaction became apparent, and she frequently complained, "Why won't she wear what I bought?" In response, my sister-in-law tried to get her daughter to wear the clothes his mother bought, but the daughter steadfastly refused. As expected, my mother-in-law was quick to be angry and sulk, and gradually her dissatisfaction turned towards her daughter-in-law, and harsh words were frequently thrown at her. Thus, my sister-in-law found herself caught between family members and was placed in a very difficult mental state. She endured daily stress while desperately hoping for an improvement in the situation, all for the sake of maintaining peace within the family. Although I couldn't actually do anything, she thanked me by saying, "I could only endure because of your support, Amy. I truly appreciate it. I felt somewhat useful and always listened attentively to my sister-in-law's stories." In such circumstances, an incident occurred. While Michael's brother was away on a business trip, his mother asked my sister-in-law to go shopping. My sister-in-law thought about taking her daughter with her, but his mother said, "I'll take care of her, so go by yourself quickly," and reluctantly, she went alone. However, what my sister-in-law saw when she returned was appalling. Her daughter was completely changed. Her neatly grown hair had been roughly cut off. What happened? This hair. My sister-in-law panicked and rushed to her daughter, who softly answered, "Grandma did it." She confronted her mother-in-law in the kitchen, demanding, "Why would you do such a thing without permission?" But his mother simply said, "Long hair is just in the way for an active girl," and did not apologize at all. Her daughter kept crying, and it was painful for her mother to see, which made her cry too. When Michael's brother returned home, a fierce argument broke out between him and his mother. This situation led Michael to intervene from a neutral standpoint, which subsequently caused him to frequently visit his parents' home. Michael's brother clearly told his mother, "Do not interfere in our lives anymore. If something happens again, I will leave the house," which seemed to upset his mother. Michael is concerned about his mother and visits frequently to support her, but I feel that this issue is not something that can be resolved simply by his intervention. Even as an outsider, it is clear that the fault lies with his mother. His mother might believe that her actions are right, but they can be bothersome to others. For this issue to be truly resolved, it is essential that his mother fully understands the impact of her actions. I have emphasized this to Michael many times, saying, "Your mother needs to understand clearly," but he replies unhelpfully, "It would be better if my sister-in-law was more compliant. She complicates matters because she is so stubborn." It seems that Michael often takes his mother's side. When I point out that his mother also has responsibilities, he counters with, "My mother is a considerate person, and as a result, I end up being scolded." I believe that when people do something for others, they do not cut someone's hair without permission. But to avoid making matters worse, I kept silent. No matter how often Michael goes to his parents' home, it is clear from his behavior that no resolution is being reached. I myself have been busy with work and have had few opportunities to visit his parents' home, but out of concern, I contacted my sister-in-law to inquire about her recent state. As expected, my sister-in-law's and her husband's stress seemed to have increased, and she shed tears over the phone. I appreciate that Michael confronts his mother, but I'm convinced that the fundamental problem won't be resolved unless she changes herself, she said. I completely agree. The feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me when I think about why Michael focused on short-term solutions and failed to understand the deep feelings of his brother and sister-in-law. While enduring these mentally tough days and wishing to somehow support his sister-in-law and her husband, I returned home from work one day to an unbelievable scene. "Welcome home, Amy," greeted his mother. Mother? Why are you here?" I was surprised. When I asked a question, Michael appeared from the back of the room and said, "I invited my mom here." She seemed uncomfortable at home, while laughing amiably with his mother. Truly, this is no laughing matter. Bringing his mother to our home without permission is not an acceptable action. Holding that thought, I confronted Michael when his mother went to the bathroom. "What's this about? You didn't discuss this with me, did you?" However, Michael justified his actions as if they were appropriate, saying, "Mom just accumulates stress being in that house. That's why I thought a change of environment was necessary." According to Michael, this was supposed to improve his mother's situation, but deciding without consulting me is unreasonable. This only increases my irritation towards him. Indeed, our apartment is family-friendly, and although there indeed was a spare room, it was intended for future use for our children and was then being used as a storage room. Michael has arbitrarily turned it into his mother's room. "How long do you intend to have your mother stay here?" I asked, to which he replied, "Well, we'll see how it goes," and then immediately started using his smartphone. Just as his mother returned from the bathroom, I was unable to continue my conversation with Michael. Considering the situation of his brother and sister-in-law, I understand that it is important to keep a physical distance from his mother, but I also live in this apartment. Honestly, it is difficult to live permanently with his mother. Nevertheless, since Michael brought her home, I cannot easily ask her to leave. Feeling the need to address this situation, I sent Michael a message during my lunch break the next day saying, "I want to talk without your mother tonight. Let's meet outside after work." I specified the time and place. After work, I went to the agreed place, but no matter how long I waited, Michael did not show up. He didn't reply to my messages, and I couldn't reach him by phone. Worried that something had happened, I decided to go back home. To my surprise, Michael had already returned home when I got there. I couldn't hide my confusion. "Didn't I tell you in the message that I wanted to talk? Why did you come home first?" I questioned him. I asked Michael in a low voice when his mother was not nearby, "Why do we need to talk? Mom is alone at home now. We should return quickly before she feels lonely," he answered. I was left speechless by his response. I was just dumbfounded and couldn't hide my surprise. I had not thought Michael could be this incomprehensible. Previously, Michael's brother and his wife lived close to the parents' home, and our interactions with them were frequent. Because of this, I often relied on Michael's brother and his wife, since we rarely visited his parents' home. I had not realized how much Michael indulged his mother. What should I do? Thinking about this, I couldn't concentrate at work and took the afternoon off, returning home early. That day, his mother said she was going out with a friend, so no one was at home, and for the first time in a long while, I was able to relax alone. Then the doorbell rang, and when I went outside, several large packages had been delivered. Michael doesn't usually shop online, and I hadn't ordered anything recently, so I was suspicious. When I checked the shipping label, all the packages were addressed to his mother, and Michael's name was listed as the sender. Michael intends to keep his mother in this house permanently, I realized immediately. In the evening, I received a message from Michael saying, "I'm having dinner with Mom before coming home." At that moment, everything seemed foolish to me, and my affection for my husband rapidly cooled. Previously, I had strongly desired to resolve the issues with his mother, but even that desire had faded. That night, I went to sleep alone without waiting for Michael and his mother to return. The next day was Michael's day off, and while I was having breakfast, he got up. "Mom's packages might arrive today, so please receive them." "I'm going shopping with her," he said nonchalantly. Without looking at him, I replied, "I sent them back." He suddenly got angry and shouted, "Why would you do that?" Calmly, I responded, "It's difficult for her to live here permanently without discussing it." Michael became furious and said, "Then you can leave." But I no longer felt shocked. I left the house and went to my parents' home. During that time, Michael contacted me several times, but each message was essentially telling me to apologize. Fed up with the nonsense, I immediately blocked his calls. Later, I prepared the necessary documents and decided to return to the apartment in a few days. When I pressed the intercom, Michael appeared and said mockingly, "Have you finally come to apologize?" While glaring at him, I declared, "I'm coming back to this apartment." Hearing my statement, he seemed to misunderstand that I was apologizing. I did not miss his smug expression. I continued to speak calmly. "So, could you and your mother please leave this place?" "What?" His eyes widened in surprise. As he looked confused, I took out some documents. "Remember? This apartment originally belonged to my parents." Michael's eyes widened further, and he was clearly shaken as he lost his words. Ignoring Michael, I continued talking. "And here is the divorce form. Sign it. If you don't want to, I will go through a lawyer. Don't think you can avoid the divorce, okay?" Michael's face turned pale rapidly, and he started to panic as if he finally realized the seriousness of the situation. He suddenly changed his attitude towards me. He repeated meaningless apologies over and over and made various excuses. But those words no longer reached me. My determination to divorce Michael had not changed. Seeing him panic, I felt no sympathy at all, which probably meant that my love for him had been gone for a long time. Still, I gave him one last warning. "Hey, don't bother your brother and his wife anymore. If something happens next time, I will support them and make things difficult for you." Hearing this, Michael's shoulders slumped, and the next day, he left the house with his mother. The two returned to his parents' home, but Michael's brother and his wife are no longer there. After his mother came to our house, his brother's family moved out immediately, and they are now living peacefully as a family of 3. Meanwhile, I live alone in the apartment, enjoying fulfilling days in both my work and private life. I still maintain a close relationship with Michael's brother and his wife, meeting occasionally to dine together. However, I have completely cut ties with my former husband and his mother, saying I will never interact with them again. For myself, this has become an opportunity to aspire to a more peaceful and happy life, paying attention to avoid similar situations in the future. Every couple, over time, experiences various problems and many difficulties. However, regarding us, we had lived peacefully without major issues for 40 years. That was how I felt about it. Little did I know, we were about to face a pitfall I never imagined. Suddenly, my husband Frank proposed a divorce. When he announced the separation, he was holding a splendid bouquet of flowers. That day was his 65th birthday, and he had just retired from his job. The bouquet, a retirement gift from his colleagues, was adorned with flowers in soft shades of orange, pale yellow, light blue, and white. Looking at the bouquet, I couldn't help thinking, "Oh, it looks expensive. Maybe worth $200 or $300. A bit stingily." As I was absent-mindedly staring at the bouquet, Frank gently smiled and handed it to me, saying, "Dorothy, thank you for all the hard work." How embarrassing. Reflecting on it, I realized I had never received a bouquet from Frank since we met. He always said, bouquets are an unnecessary luxury. So whenever we celebrated, we always dined out luxuriously. When I asked him what he wanted for his birthday during our early dating days, His reply was something like, all-you-can-eat barbecue. Moreover, since he lacked the sense of gifting others to bring them joy, I had never received a present, not even flowers, for my birthday. It was surprising that Frank, of all people, chose to give me a bouquet on his retirement day. It was clear he didn't buy it himself and probably thought, I don't need a bouquet. But I still felt happy. What's this all about? Well done, Frank. Now you can relax and enjoy doing what you love, I said, a bit overwhelmed. While my heart was still fluttering as I received the bouquet, Frank said seriously, thank you for helping around the house. You're not needed anymore. I want a divorce. I will live with my mother from now on. Frank and I were high school classmates and started dating in our second year. After breaking up and getting back together several times, we married on my 25th birthday. Our relationship was more like friends of the opposite sex who got along well, and we married because being with each other was fun and comforting. We have 2 children, but parenting wasn't too burdensome as our parents loved their grandchildren and actively helped out. We were able to enjoy work and leisure, sometimes together and sometimes separately with our friends. This is why we faced fewer issues than a typical couple. There was just one instance when Frank had an affair in his 40s, and by the time I found out, they had already broken up. I discovered a photo of Frank cozily close to his mistress, presumably taken during a company trip, in his bag about 6 months later. Even though we had a friendship like marriage, finding that photo was a huge shock. When I confronted him, he readily admitted to the affair, which lasted about 2 months after the trip. He told me plainly, I felt lonely when you were busy with work and often stayed in hotels, and my heart wandered to a female assistant. Maybe I should have expressed more strongly how much that incident had shocked me. But in the end, you were the best. That girl always wanted accessories or to watch foreign romance movies, which was troublesome. I've come to appreciate your good points again, he said, and I felt inclined to forgive him. So, we didn't take any major steps like divorce. I realized I had also been underestimating Frank, so I decided to quit my job and reflect on this. That was about the extent of our major marital issues. But it seems it wasn't the same for Frank. He said he had felt uncomfortable since our honeymoon. I wanted a trip focused on dining, but you selfishly chose a sightseeing-centric itinerary. Even during the tours, I was just hungry, and the meals provided were ordinary. I felt at that time that you were someone who didn't consider my preferences. What? He had been thinking that for 40 years. I was really shocked inside. Sure, our honeymoon was sightseeing-focused, but who was it that enjoyed it at the time? Who was the one who went out on a special night tour, leaving me at the hotel suffering from jet lag? Even with jet lag, if you were really interested in enjoying the trip, you could have rested properly on the plane. It's all about mindset. That's ridiculous. Frank had always been somewhat self-centered, but I never thought he was this bad. As I stood there speechless, Frank said, "It would be hard to leave suddenly, so I'll give you a month. Please take all your things and leave during that time." And then he went back to his room. Thinking of pleasing Frank, I had prepared high-quality beef, fine wine, and cakes made by a renowned pâtissier, all arranged on the living room table. And I had even laid a stylish tablecloth. As I looked at this scene, tears started to flow. The next day, as Frank was about to go out, I approached him and asked why he considered divorce and chose to tell me on his retirement day. Frank coldly replied, "While I was employed, I needed your help for household chores and to take care of me. But now that I'm retired, you're no longer needed. A housemaid can replace your role." After that, Frank hardly interacted with me, didn't eat the meals I prepared, or even gave his laundry for washing. When I asked how he was managing meals and laundry, he said he was using restaurants and coin laundries. "I've made preparations so I can live without you." Nowadays, a man can manage alone. I see, so Frank really only saw me as a household helper while I was working. I was also working and contributing $2,100 a month for living expenses. And to think this is what it came to on his retirement day. Feeling there was nothing more to say, I decided to first talk with our children. Frank and I have a 39-year-old son and a 37-year-old daughter, both married and living in nearby states. I called them to a cafe and revealed that I was considering a divorce. My son immediately responded, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But when did you realize, Mom?" "Realize what?" As I looked puzzled, my son also seemed surprised. "Wait, you really didn't know? Dad's been having an affair with a younger woman." My son said he saw Frank and a young woman heading towards a motel while he was walking in a busy district on a sales call. When I expressed shock, Frank initially panicked, but then said, "It's just for fun, Mom knows about it. Remember when you were 20, how Dad had an affair with a colleague from work? Mom was calm about it then, and I thought it would be the same this time." My son casually mentioned this, Frank having an affair again, and to think he was deceiving me with such lies. I had believed him when he said he would live with his mother after our divorce, but that turned out to be a lie too. As I was stunned, my daughter suggested using a detective agency to investigate Frank's actions. Indeed, there's no point in just being shocked. It would be regretful to let this end without doing anything. I decided to conduct a thorough investigation. After a week of investigation, it was revealed that Frank's mistress was a front desk worker at his company, and he was giving her a set amount of money as an allowance every month. A detective recorded their conversation in a cafe, where it was heard that the allowance was about $1,000 per month, and the woman was asking for more. Frank's response was, "I plan to divorce my wife, so let's get married. I'll arrange for more than enough money." So that's why he was trying to get me out of the house. My children suggested that I talk to this woman. However, I wanted to shock Frank and his mistress in a more effective way. After researching extensively on the internet and consulting a lawyer acquaintance, I found a way to have a significant impact on them. A few days later, I called Frank to the living room and said, "I accept the divorce, but we need to properly settle the compensation and property division." Frank immediately responded, "We should split half of the money in each of our bank accounts and half the value of this house and land. That's about property division. But first, let's talk about compensation. I intend to demand $50,000 from you." "Why?" "Late life divorces aren't uncommon. Why do I have to pay that much?" As Frank scoffed, I showed him several photos of his affair. "This should explain why you need to pay compensation," I said, and Frank looked shocked. "Besides, I recorded your conversation, and I know she gets an allowance of $1,000 every month. Oh, and planning a trip to celebrate 3 years of dating and marriage? That means for 3 years, you've been giving her $1,000 monthly. That money belongs to our marital assets, so I'll include it in the property division." One more fact. Frank had left an open credit card statement scattered everywhere. After collecting and scrutinizing them, I found suspicious expenses totaling over $20,000, including stays at high-end hotels in the capital and purchases from famous international brands for women. I would also include these in the property division. By the way, I found a lease agreement for an apartment from 3 years ago under your name. I had a detective check, and it turns out your mistress lives there. I'll include that rent in our shared assets too. As I calmly presented all these facts, Frank's face went pale. A natural reaction considering these amounts added up to nearly $100,000. It was later revealed that Frank had about $50,000 in his account at the time. Frank thought he would just have to pay me half of that, $25,000, but with a total of about $150,000 in savings calculated, he now needed to pay me about $75,000. Wait, how much do you have in your account? Half of that is mine, Frank exclaimed in panic, so I showed him my bank book. There was about $70,000 in my account. This meant that Frank was entitled to $35,000, so he needed to pay me $40,000. Additionally, when I mentioned that the house and land should also be divided as part of the property settlement, he claimed, "This house and land are in my name. They are not shared property." However, legally, the house and land are considered shared property regardless of whose name they are under. I should also add that I've paid for all the house repairs from my account. Remember, this house was second-hand and needed repairs several times? The total cost was about $50,000, so you owe me half of that, $25,000. Even if we sold the house and land and split the proceeds, Frank would not end up in debt, but he was quite disappointed, thinking he would receive the entire sale profit. But I just laughed and said, too bad. Here's the divorce papers." As I handed them over, I saw a slight smile on Frank's face. Pretending not to notice, I urged him, "Sign it quickly. I'm planning to submit it right now." After he signed on the spot, I grabbed the documents and hurried to the city office. When I returned home 30 minutes later, Frank was sitting confidently on the sofa. It seemed he thought everything was resolved with our earlier conversation. Then I delivered the final blow. "Let's talk about your retirement benefits." His face showed full confidence. "Unfortunately, I haven't received my retirement benefits yet. They won't come in for another 3 to 4 months. We're divorced now, so that money isn't shared property," he declared, just as I expected. Feigning surprise, I asked, "Really? That's terrible. How much will you receive?" Frank proudly answered, $120,000. Impressive, right? That amount is average for a small to medium-sized company. So, I'll be receiving $60,000, right? Wait, hold on. The retirement benefits will be paid after our divorce. Frank replied in shock. That's the thing. Even after divorce, retirement benefits are subject to property division. I read online about a case where a couple divorced 5 years before retirement, and the retirement benefits were divided. So, if you don't sell this house and land, your assets will be negative. But even if you sell, you won't get enough money to satisfy your mistress. With that, Frank looked completely stunned, his mouth agape in disbelief. Poor thing. By the way, when we had the house appraised, it was valued at about $300,000, including the land. If we sold it, we could each get about $150,000. But Frank's mistress had insisted on not selling the house, so Frank reluctantly agreed to pay me $150,000. Including the $50,000 in compensation, Frank ended up with a total debt of $200,000. It's puzzling why his mistress, who is still in her 30s, was so smitten with the older Frank and fixated on that house. Despite being old, the single-family house in the city with good transport accessibility must have been attractive. After they remarried, Frank's new wife's parents brought all their furniture and moved into that house. As a result, Frank, who had planned a leisurely life with his retirement benefits, property division, and pension, now had to support his new wife and her parents with just his pension, while also struggling to repay debts. Eventually, he had to look for work again, probably earning around $30,000 a year at over 65. Additionally, since I claimed $20,000 in compensation from his new wife, their marital relationship is reportedly very strained. It's only a matter of time before Frank loses that house. Moreover, due to the rental apartment he rented for his mistress, which was occupied by someone else, a breach of contract occurred. I notified the real estate management company, resulting in a penalty fee. Really, it's quite pitiful. As for me, I had a good income originally, so I moved into a luxury apartment after the divorce and am living comfortably. I work 3 days a week at a supermarket that hires people even at 65. My daughter's house is nearby, so I live in peace. My granddaughter, just entering middle school and in her rebellious phase, cares for her recently divorced grandmother and visits often. She's a very kind girl. Though I no longer have a husband, my time with my granddaughter has increased, and I'm truly enjoying these happy moments. Next month, my sister will start living with us. Can you give up your room? He left the door ajar and said to me inside. When my husband said that, all I could do was stare back at him in astonishment. Because the door was only half open, Ken seemed unaware that his sister, Susan, was in the room. At that moment, Susan and I exchanged glances, her face expressing unexpected surprise, clearly indicating she had not been informed of this plan by my husband. Struggling to muster some strength, I addressed Susan, who was about to say something, with an encouraging "it's no problem," and then declared my resolution to my husband. "I understand. I'll contact the moving company to arrange the move." "What?" my husband exclaimed in surprise, but I continued. "I'm filing for a divorce. You understand why, right?" I said, presenting the screen of my smartphone to him. At that moment, his color changed and he turned pale. A new battle was about to begin. My name is Lisa. The year I turned 26, I unexpectedly ran into Susan, whom I looked up to during my university years, on the street. Upon meeting her, she introduced me to her younger brother, Ken. That was when me and Ken met. Susan was, thanks to her warm personality, beloved by many, especially her juniors. She always listened to our questions and went out of her way to teach us whenever we didn't understand something. We hit it off and developed a particularly close relationship. She often reached out to me. Even after graduating from university, we continued to stay in touch. We exchanged messages and even sent letters to each other, joyfully sharing updates about our lives. Since Ken was the same age as me, Susan arranged for us to have tea together. When Ken learned we were the same age, he suggested, "You don't have to call me little brother. Since we're the same age, just call me Ken." After that, I started calling him Ken. He called Melissa, and thanks to Susan, we had a delightful tea time. Later, when Susan asked me about my impression of Ken, I replied, "He's a nice person, just like I had imagined." She responded, "It seems like a tough journey ahead, but I'm glad you think of him favorably." At the time, I didn't grasp the meaning of Susan's comment, but it turned out that Ken was interested in me and had consulted with Susan about wanting to meet again. Hearing this, Susan went out of her way to call me to see if something was going on between us. Later, Ken, Susan, and I had another meal together, during which Susan had to step away temporarily due to a sudden call from her workplace. That's when Ken proposed to me, saying, "I've been interested in you. Would you consider going out with me? Even if it's just as a trial?" I didn't have special feelings for Ken at that time, but I agreed to date him, not wanting to hurt his feelings and feeling it would be unfair to Susan. Days passed, and during a date without Susan, I surprisingly found myself enjoying Ken's company and the date. This might actually be good. I began to think, and it seemed my feelings were conveyed to Ken as well. Susan warmly watched over us as we got along well, and both Ken's parents and mine supported our relationship. After 2 years of dating, we decided to get married. Both families expressed their joy as if they had been waiting for this moment, and we blushed with bashful smiles. It wasn't until the exchange of business cards between Ken's father and my father when they met that I first learned Susan and Ken were actually the daughter and son of a CEO. Susan, with an apologetic demeanor, explained, "My father always told me not to disclose this matter. That's why I couldn't talk about it until now." Understanding it was probably a measure to ward off those targeting their wealth, I conveyed that it didn't bother me at all. Learning that Susan and Ken were considered future CEO candidates in their father's company, I was only able to express my surprise. "Oh, I see." Despite knowing Susan and Ken's potential future roles, my attitude towards them didn't change. My in-laws, very pleased with my attitude, offered to cover the entire cost of our wedding. When I shared that I intended to pay with my own funds, my parents revealed, "You see, we've actually been saving up for your wedding." Eventually, both our parents decided to cover the wedding expenses. With blessings for our marriage from both sides, I vowed that I would repay their kindness. After getting married, I actively sought to deepen our relationships by regularly communicating with my in-laws and my own parents, and sending gifts. I felt we had a great relationship. The interaction between our families increased as all four parents went on a hot spring trip together. However, 3 years into our marriage, I started noticing changes in Ken's behavior. Initially, it was just a slight sense of discomfort. Despite Ken's workplace supposedly having less overtime, he spent most of the week working late and often came home smelling of alcohol. Perhaps he was just drinking alone at a bar after work. I knew that his job was demanding, especially since he was expected to be the next CEO. I wanted to support him as much as possible. Still, the ongoing overtime was concerning. One day, worried, I directly asked him about his situation. "Are you okay? You've been doing a lot of overtime lately. Aren't you feeling tired?" Concerned about his daily fatigue and attempting to have a conversation with him, he reacted with obvious irritation. "I can take care of myself. I want to be free from work stress at home. Please don't bring up overtime," he said, and with those words, he turned on the TV, ending our conversation there. I noticed that his attitude had become particularly cold recently. It might be the exhaustion from work. Hoping to help him regain his energy, I tried to alleviate his fatigue with hot baths and made his favorite dishes for lunch. However, one day, when I came home and went to wash his used lunchbox, I noticed that the usual dividers and small cups were missing. While I was happy that he was eating his lunch, the disappearance of the dividers and cups was certainly not normal. Faced with this situation, I got worried. A terrible thought crossed my mind. Could it be that he's throwing away the lunches I made with love? If he threw away the lunch, it would make sense that the dividers and cups would also be discarded, hence why they were missing. That day, I was enveloped in deep sadness as I looked at the empty lunchbox. The thought that the lunches I made might have been thrown away made my heart ache, and tears started to flow. I had doubts in my heart, wondering, is he throwing away the lunches I made? Yet, I didn't have the courage to confront him directly with this question. Instead, I casually asked, "Do you mind if I stop making lunches for you?" He appeared momentarily puzzled, but then, after some thought, replied, "That might be better. What one wants to eat can change daily, and it must be hard for you to make lunch every day. You don't need to make it from tomorrow on." It seemed as if he was saying he didn't need the lunch out of consideration for me. But the thought that my homemade lunches were unnecessary for him pained my heart. The next day, while I was working in my room, I heard Ken, not knowing he returned home already, talking on the phone in the next room with the window open, and his voice inadvertently reached me. "Well, my wife asked me if it's okay not to make lunches from tomorrow on." I wondered what she was thinking, considering she's the one being supported by me. I kind of pondered what she had provided since we got married. But it was troublesome to carry around garbage, so I pretended to be considerate and told her it's okay not to make lunches anymore. Hearing his words hurt me and enveloped me in sadness. In that moment, my hand moved unconsciously, activating the recording app on my smartphone. Listening to the recording later, I realized Ken had been speaking quite loudly on the phone, and his words were clearly captured. I had no idea how to handle the situation. At that time, I decided to consult with Susan, who had always been a strong presence in my life. When I mentioned that I wanted to talk about something, she made time on her next day off, and we went to a cafe with private cabins together. It was comforting to know that even if I started crying, I won't have to worry about others around me. When I began to earnestly talk about wanting to know how Ken behaves at work, Susan listened intently with a serious expression. Upon hearing Ken's recorded voice, she was outraged, saying, "That's unacceptable. Treating the lunches you painstakingly made as trash. complaining about lunches made for him. And what does he mean by what she has provided? You have been doing all the household chores, right? I could only nod in silence. We both work, but since getting married, I naturally took on all the household duties. I was under the impression that his work was more demanding than mine. That's why I never asked him to help with chores at home, thinking his position as a future CEO candidate was challenging enough and wanting him to have some peace and quiet at home. But to think that my efforts were taken for granted and even perceived as nothing. I can't understand why Ken suddenly started saying such things. Maybe something happened at work. His overtime has increased lately. What? Our company is currently aiming to eliminate overtime, so there's no way Ken is working late. What? I was shocked to learn that he was lying. What on earth was going on with him? As I truly enjoyed our time together and felt deeply for him, knowing about his betrayal made tears stream down my face uncontrollably. Susan gently placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I'll look into Ken's situation. It's okay for you to go back to your parents' house for a while. Discuss it with your father and mother. We'll say that you are going on a trip with your mom to keep things under wraps. Thank you. I leave it to you." Feeling the difficulty of continuing to live with Ken under these circumstances, I was truly grateful for Susan's suggestion. Later, Susan shared what I had told her with my in-laws and also shared the audio data I provided. They promised to do their utmost to investigate Ken's actions. Having allies other than Ken was incredibly reassuring for me, a testament to the good relationships we've built over time. And within just a week, Susan and my in-laws came to visit my parents' house. As soon as they entered the living room and said, "We are terribly sorry," my whole family, including myself, were taken aback. We quickly asked them to sit down on the sofa, served tea, and then began to inquire about what had happened. The truth is, I am very sorry to say, but our son seems to be having an affair. The father-in-law started to explain with a sense of unease. Having been quietly reflecting at my parents' home, I had suspected that Ken might be having an affair, so it wasn't entirely unexpected. However, faced with the reality of one's spouse being unfaithful was an immeasurable blow. At that moment, I felt all the strength drain from my body, and my mother gently supported my shoulder, seeing my distress. It appears that during Ken's absence, my in-laws and Susan discreetly investigated his actions at work, checking security footage, and uncovered his affair with a new female employee. Due to Susan being in a different department and Ken's position as the CEO's son, no one felt able to speak up, which led to this situation. The new employee was informed by her colleagues that Ken was married, yet she responded with indifference, continuing the relationship despite knowing he was married. During lunch breaks, Ken was seen in the relaxation area with the new employee, sharing the lunch she brought. This seems to be the reason as to why he no longer needed the lunches you made, resulting in him discarding them. In fact, there were witnesses who saw the new employee empty the lunchbox contents into a trash can. It was unbelievable that something like this had been going on at the company, and that people knew yet remained silent. Did the president's son and his affair partner have that much influence within the company? The father-in-law, deeply pained by the situation, expressed, "I cannot believe such things were happening in our company. I am really sorry. I feel remorseful not just for my son's actions but also for my position as the leader of the organization." He then made it clear, "There is one thing this incident has made evident. He is not fit to take over our business. It's secondary whether he has the business acumen or not. A person who strays from the right path cannot be entrusted with our company." Hearing this, I felt a sense of relief. I had sensed that Ken's current arrogance was due to his awareness of being a future CEO candidate. If he loses his position as a potential CEO, I thought he might become more humble. Even if we might have been able to repair our relationship and return to normal, it was impossible for me to continue living under the same roof with him. I made up my mind to divorce him. The first thing to do was to go back home and have a serious conversation with Ken. Susan insisted on coming with me, saying, "I'm worried about you being alone." "Oh, right. We should call the moving company in advance." "Father, please take care of that." "All right, I'll handle it," my father-in-law replied, and I asked him to arrange various things before heading home with Susan. While Ken was not home yet, I started packing my belongings in my room. Then, it seemed Ken had returned home and was approaching my room with loud footsteps. "Next month, my sister will start living with us. Can you give up your room?" He said this with the door half open, not realizing that Susan was in the room with me. At that moment, Susan and I exchanged glances, her face expressing unexpected surprise, clearly indicating she had not been informed of this plan by my husband. We suspected that he might be using the excuse of living with Susan to actually create a hideaway for his affair inside our home. Feeling outraged that Susan's name was being used for such a despicable scheme, I gathered my strength and responded to my husband. "I understand. I'll contact the moving company to arrange the move." "What?" my husband exclaimed in surprise, but I continued. "I'm filing for a divorce. You understand why, right?" I said, presenting the screen of my smartphone to him. At that moment, his face turned pale, shocked by the image on the screen, a photo I received from my father-in-law showing Ken and the new female employee intimately together at the company. The extent of their reckless behavior was evident from photos taken by their colleagues and surveillance camera footage, showing how thoughtlessly they acted without regard for those around them. "What are these? Where did these photos come from? And what is this moving company?" my husband asked in confusion. At that moment, a lively voice from the entrance said, "Excuse us." And Ken rushed to the entrance, only to see the movers entering our home. What's going on?" He tried to stop the movers, but during that moment, I handed him the divorce papers. When he turned around, my sister-in-law, who had been hiding behind me, appeared, making his face turn even paler. "Susan, just sign it quickly. Don't cause any more trouble for Lisa." "What are you talking about? Did Lisa call you here? This is my house." "Oh, the sofa. And the massage chair. They're mine." While he was shouting and holding his head, my father-in-law entered, bypassing the movers. "What are you talking about? I gave all these as presents. They are not yours. You haven't done anything for Lisa on your own, yet you speak like this. Dad." Ken must not have expected his family to come together and criticize him for planning to use my room for another purpose. He probably never thought that I would seek help from anyone else because I had always been devoted to him. He might have thought that I would tolerate his infidelity and say nothing, enduring it quietly. But there were things even I couldn't tolerate. I can't build trust with someone who throws away my homemade lunches while eating another's and boldly lying. Why is everyone? In front of me stood not only my father-in-law but also my mother-in-law and my parents, all casting cold gazes at Ken. It didn't take long for Ken to realize he had no allies left. "You are no longer a part of this family." "Wow. To engage in an affair within the company? You've got nerves. You will be transferred to our overseas factory. If you dislike that, resign and start a new life somewhere far away." "But, Dad, I was supposed to be the next president. Since my sister is a woman and I am your son, shouldn't I be the most suitable for the position?" Silence. "Just because you are my son doesn't mean I can entrust you with our business. You truly underestimate corporate management. More and more, I see that someone like you is unnecessary for our company." My father-in-law's stern words completely unsettled Ken, shattering his title of future CEO candidate. As a result, he signed the divorce papers in front of me, appearing soulless, ensuring that our divorce would be finalized smoothly. While Ken was in a daze, his parents took him back to their home. In the meantime, Susan helped me organize my belongings, and I was able to return to my parents' home. The furniture moved out by the movers was stored in a rental warehouse, all high-quality items that my father-in-law offered for me to use freely when starting my new life. The next day, Ken's affair partner, unaware of anything, showed up at work and, upon learning that everything had been exposed, she shed tears. Her parents were then summoned to the president's office, where they deeply apologized for their daughter's actions. It seems her parents were planning to make their daughter work hard as a form of compensation for her actions, Meanwhile, Ken, failing to grasp the gravity of the situation, was sent off to the overseas factory, where he finally seemed to comprehend his predicament. Caught in a place where he can't escape the judgmental eyes of others, he seems to be making daily efforts to pay the alimony, despite wanting to return home. For about a month after the divorce, I was feeling depressed, but Susan invited me out and cheered me up. She even suggested, "How about we share a room together?" So now we are happily searching for a place to live together. Now that my parents will be living with us, it would be best for you, an outsider, to move into a cheaper facility. My husband, who only used me while I dreamed of happiness, ended it just like that. Betrayed by my in-laws as well, I was utterly shocked. In response, I immediately started preparing and contacted all relevant parties. Where did all the furniture and appliances go? I arranged for a company to come and take them away. What? The next day, I contacted the company to take away the furniture and appliances, and the pickup was completed. My husband was confused and couldn't hide his disturbance. My name is Michelle Smith. I am 35 years old. After graduating from college, I continued to work from home. I commute only once a month. I am employed as a regular employee, but the company has been very considerate of my situation. The reason is that both of my legs are disabled. Therefore, I use a wheelchair even for moving around indoors. This condition was caused by a motorcycle accident during my college years. I was hit from behind on the highway and thrown into the air. I remember the sensation at that time. Everything was strangely in slow motion. This might be the end, I thought calmly while I was in the air. Fortunately, my life was spared, but my legs became disabled. I am still continuing rehabilitation, but it seems unlikely that I will return to my previous condition. I have lived a life using a wheelchair for many years. Perhaps I will spend the rest of my life being single. After coming to terms with the condition of my legs, the me who once longed for marriage began to feel this way. At one time, my friends planned a mixer for me. That's where I met my current husband, Ken. He is 5 years older than me. He looks younger than his actual age. In addition, I was surprised by how youthful his actions and speech were, not seeming like someone who is 40 at all. To put it nicely, he's simple and honest. Surprisingly, he didn't mind my wheelchair at all and asked various questions without any hesitation. How do you manage meals? What about housework? Can you reach the laundry? What about work? Are you okay with using the toilet and bathing by yourself? While others were hesitant, Ken had no such reservations, and that was refreshing. I was so happy because I had never met someone I could talk to so openly. While most people would not ask about my legs, Ken did not hesitate to ask various questions. Normally, it might be considered rude, but his interest was a joy for me. He was genuinely interested in me. After several dates, we started dating. With him, I can surely be happy. At that time, only Ken was in my eyes, and I felt like I would never meet anyone else who could be by my side. Then, about half a year into our relationship, I received a proposal, and I felt extremely happy at that moment. However, the situation changed drastically shortly after we got married. We started our married life together in my single-family home. This house is a bit expensive for rent but is a comfortable dwelling suitable for wheelchair living. Probably it's thanks to the previous tenant who modified it for barrier-free access. Ken liked the spacious house. Since I spend a lot of time at home, I took on most of the housework. Sometimes, when I was not feeling well, I would ask him for help, but he would say, "I'm tired today," and wouldn't help at all. Moreover, he refused to assist with bathing. What? No, I don't want to do that. Indeed, I can manage by myself, but it takes a considerable amount of time. When I was living alone, I used to have a helper come twice a week to assist with bathing, but on the other days, I managed by myself. Although I'm used to it, I can't help thinking it would be easier if Ken would help. It always took a long time to take a bath. I was not hiring a helper anymore because Ken said it was a waste of money. While relaxing in the bath, I suddenly thought, my arms are tired. This bathroom was originally adapted for barrier-free access. It was an important factor when choosing the property. However, when Ken takes a bath first, he doesn't put away the wash bowl, and he leaves shampoo bottles directly on the floor. It takes extra time and effort to pick them up. Can't you consider that I have to bathe by myself too? I want to take a bath without thinking about anything. Ken wouldn't listen to anything I said. This house is adapted for you. I moved here for you, you know. Got a problem with that? But you said you wanted to live here too, right? Huh? When did I say something like that? This house is where I lived before. Therefore, it is adapted so that I can live comfortably even with a wheelchair. When Ken first came here, he was impressed with the size of the house and the appliances, especially because I had invested a bit in electronics and furniture. I want to live here after we get married, he had said. Now he says, these handrails are in the way. It's like a nursing home. Why would you say something like that? Maybe I should have looked for other houses as well. It was only after we started living together that I finally realized. Ken decided to marry me because I had a house, a stable income, and domestic skills. Even during the mixer, he actively asked about my housekeeping skills. Marrying me, despite my disability, earned him praise as the ideal husband and a kind husband from those around us. But that was a misunderstanding. Despite my disability, I am independent, yet he is dependent on me for everything. As evidence, he spends most days out and about. Since the beginning of our relationship, he hasn't held a stable job and continues to live a part-time lifestyle. After getting married and realizing this reality, I have been brought to tears by my own pitiful situation. Yet, I chose not to leave him. I convinced myself that the fact he married me means he must have some affection for me, though I do not feel completely loved by him. Hey, can you give me some pocket money? I just gave you some, didn't I? I've already spent that. Ken, though unemployed, started demanding money from me. So, I consulted Ken's mother. Ken doesn't seem willing to work. What should I do? He's been working hard for a long time, so he's just tired. Let him rest a bit. My mother-in-law, who had always said, consult me about anything, ended up taking her son's side when I actually did. Indeed, Ken is her only son, so maybe it can't be helped, but I was not satisfied with that answer. My parents have already passed away, and I have no other family to rely on. Therefore, I was enveloped in despair. I thought about seeking advice from friends, but when I once mentioned a minor complaint, I was told that's a luxurious problem to have. Ken's outward appearance is that good. That evening, I ended up being scolded by Ken. What's this, huh? You've been talking unnecessary things to my mom. Are you talking about the job? Yes, that. Why would you say something that worries the elderly? I can't believe it. Then, you should just work so you won't cause any worry. When I argued back, Ken left the house. Whenever things don't go his way, he runs away. And then he comes back late at night, drunk. It's me. I'm back. It's already morning. Keep it down because it bothers the neighbors. Shut up. Don't talk back to me. When he's drunk, he becomes uncontrollable. In times like this, all I can do is stay silent and endure. I might have reached my limit. That's what I started to think. But becoming lonely again is hard. I was wondering whether I should continue to endure or live alone for the rest of my life. When divorce started to seem like a realistic option, Ken suddenly made this suggestion. How about we live together with my parents? What, you mean move back to your parents' place? No, my parents will come here. Ken spoke as if living together was the natural course of action. And he had decided they would move into our house without consulting me. Indeed, my in-laws are getting older, and I understand the desire to be near them. But both are still healthy, and they have their own home, so it's unclear why they need to move here. Is it really necessary for them to live here? The house will be too small for 4 people, and I work from home, so it will cause problems. You always only think about yourself. I didn't realize you were such a cold person. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to forcibly move here when there's a perfectly good house already available. This place is bigger, has the latest facilities, and is convenient, right? Plus, it's barrier-free. If my in-laws come here, I'll need to be considerate while working. Ken is hardly ever home, so it's not a problem for him. But my in-laws, being pensioners, will likely spend a lot of time at home. Additionally, it takes longer for me to do tasks like using the toilet or bathing compared to others, so living with restraints would be a significant mental and physical burden. Please give me some time to think. There's no time to wait. Hurry up. Ken said he couldn't wait, but without actually waiting, he brought his parents over for the weekend. It seemed that discussions about living together had been progressing in this household for some time. Hey, I've been thinking, what about you moving into a facility? Excuse me? I was shocked and couldn't believe what I heard. A facility as in for me to move into? Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It must be hard doing various things by yourself, right? In a facility, they'll take care of everything for you. Apparently, he was not just thinking about living together but also about kicking me out of the house. I'll come to check on you sometimes. I saw the reality clearly. If I don't confront this now, when will I? Honestly, what do you think of me? You're my wife, right? You're saying you'd send your wife you love to a facility? Hold on. When did I ever say I loved you? I felt my face getting hot. This man was just using me all along. I should have realized that long ago. The moment I realized it was time to put an end to everything, Ken uttered something unbelievable. Since this house will be lived in by my parents and me, you, an outsider, will be moving into a cheaper facility. What do you mean? When I looked to my in-laws for some form of rescue, they wore sarcastic smiles. Why are you laughing? Well, it's just funny. Sorry about that. They might have had their eyes on my house since even before we got married. Clearly, the situation was moving rapidly. I felt a strong need to get them out of the house. Please leave. What did you say? Please leave right now. Hey, why are you speaking to my parents like that? It seemed like I was seeing Ken's true colors. He was shouting at me with a face full of anger. If he cares so much about his parents, he should earn and build a house for them. Why try to take mine? Anger was boiling over in my head. Ken, calm down. She is just shocked by the sudden news. We just came for a preliminary look today. Yes, it's natural to check the house before moving in. It has become more livable than before, with more appliances. They came with the serious intention of taking my house. I tried to take a deep breath to calm down. As I inhaled oxygen, suddenly, a suspicion crossed my mind. How do they plan to make a living after I leave? My in-laws live on their pension, and Ken is employed on a non-regular basis. Currently, I pay for all the rent and daily expenses of this house. Who will pay the $2,000 living expenses? Do my in-laws think Ken earns enough for the rent and living expenses? Regardless of my concerns, my in-laws left the house contentedly. Ken also left with them. I'll be staying at my parents' house tonight. Wait, I want to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I, as the head of the household, have made my decision. My opinion won't change. I was left behind, stunned and bewildered, but I couldn't just sit still. Thinking I had to come up with a plan, I contacted an acquaintance who is a real estate agent. That night, Ken stayed at his parents' house and did not return. They were probably celebrating together. I quickly sorted my belongings into what I needed and what I didn't. When Ken returned home the next day and saw the organized luggage, he laughed. Oh, you've started sorting out your belongings already. Have you found a facility? Yes, that's right. My immediate response seemed to take Ken by surprise. Then, I handed Ken a signed divorce form. Here, sign this. I've already signed it, so just fill in your part quickly. Divorce papers? Why are we getting divorced? Since you're trying to kick me out of the house, there's no point in continuing this marriage, is there? Ken looked utterly taken aback. Apparently, he hadn't anticipated a divorce proposal from me. No, you can't manage without me, can you? Huh? I can't understand that reasoning. Who else is going to marry you, considering I'm your only option? If you divorce me, you'll likely be single for life. I can live on my own. But you wanted to get married, didn't you? Seeing Ken's perturbation, it became clear just how self-centered he was. He approached me thinking of me as a lonely single woman with a disability, someone vulnerable. I am independent, financially stable, and do not struggle with my lifestyle. Moreover, I can manage household tasks well since I spend a lot of time at home. For him, I was the ideal partner who could enable him to live freely without working. Without working, he would still have money coming in. Praised by others for marrying me, he felt secure thinking I had no other options and wouldn't leave him. But being presented the divorce papers immediately must have surprised him. Why? If we get divorced, you might end up single for the rest of your life. Actually, I feel much better about being single than continuing to live a married life with you. Do you really intend to spend the end of your life alone, in solitude? He asked me, almost sneering. Whether I feel lonely or not is not for you to decide. That's not something someone else should comment on. When I, who had been submissive, retaliated with a strong tone, he was clearly shaken. Ken's unease was evident, as if a pigeon had been hit by a pea shooter, caught off guard by the sudden change. I hadn't realized until now how feeble he was. Why had I been so considerate and obedient to him? It was hard for me to understand myself. The moment I decided on divorce, it felt like a heavy burden was lifted from my heart, as if I had gained a new freedom. Perhaps I had always been trapped by the concept of marriage, only able to see myself within its confines. And I realized that for the first time then. Anyway, there's no need to rush out of this house so suddenly. I said you should go to a facility because I didn't think you'd act so quickly, he said as if making excuses. Don't worry, I'll do as you wish. Now, sign the divorce papers, I responded calmly. I can't believe you'd find a new place to live so quickly. Wait, reconsider this. No need to worry. I've already settled the contract with the facility. What? Wait, isn't that too fast? He couldn't hide his panic. Watching his sudden change of attitude, I observed him with a detached view. Sometimes he scoffed. At times he was frantic, behaving erratically. As I gradually regained my composure, his presence began to feel increasingly bothersome. I've already arranged things with the facility. They're aware of my situation, so there's no need to worry. Hey, when did you make such preparations? I had my suspicions, but have you planned this ahead? Yes, actually, even before I met you. In truth, I had my eye on a specific facility in anticipation of my old age. It looked like a condo complex. When I was injured, feeling uncertain about the future, I devoured investment books while hospitalized. As a result, I decided to start investing in stocks and real estate. I used my income and inheritance from my parents to diversify my investments. The facility I had been eyeing was actually already purchased by me and had been operated as a rental property for a long time, generating rental income. I had never mentioned any of this to Ken. It was my secret source of wealth. We don't need a divorce. I get it. You can stay here. Let's live together with my parents. You really don't understand anything. As if I would ever agree to live together. He seemed completely oblivious. Even in the situation of offering a divorce, he still thought I had no other options but him. Unfortunately, I can't change what I've already decided. What are you talking about? Always pushing your own agenda. If you're going to say that, then do as you please. Don't blame me when you regret it later. Don't worry, I won't regret anything. Now, hurry up and sign. Ken fell silent for a moment, seemingly deep in thought. As time passed, I busied myself with packing. Then, I could hear Ken talking on the phone from a distance. Judging by his tone, he was likely consulting with his parents. The fact that he couldn't make his own decisions without relying on his parents filled me with contempt. Eventually, Ken returned to the room and suddenly approached me. Fine, we'll divorce. But once you sign, leave this house immediately. He signed the divorce papers reluctantly. He probably felt the loss of having me who had taken care of the household. However, maybe he thought that with his parents, he wouldn't need to worry about housework for the time being. Having acquired the house and all its furnishings and appliances, everything needed for living was already in place. He must have rationalized it that way. Well, I'm going to discuss our future life with my parents. You get ready to move out quickly. He tossed the divorce papers at me and left for his parents' house again. Understood? I'll do just that. My move was completed within a week. During that period, Ken did not show himself. A day after I finished moving, we met again when I was starting my new life in the new residence. Ken called me back to our previous home. What's this? The house is empty. Where did all the appliances go? I had them all picked up by a service. What do you mean? The day before, I had contacted a service to collect the furniture and appliances. Ken fell into panic, unable to hide his turmoil. Not just Ken, but his parents were also there. The appliances here were bought by me. I've been using most of them since before I was married. The only things that are yours are these. There were only 3 cardboard boxes left there. Only the clear storage boxes that were purchased after the marriage were left behind. Wait, we can't live like this. Even though we're divorced, there needs to be a division of assets. That's right, we can't live like this. What are you talking about? It's impossible to live here now anyway. What do you mean? The rent for this place is $2,000, you know? Ken and his parents were at a loss for words. Aside from his parents, I had clearly explained this to Ken when we got married. This house, it's not owned by you? That's right, I don't own it. This place was rented through a real estate agency run by an acquaintance, who gave me a slight discount on the rent. I had informed him that if I were to leave, the rent would naturally increase. Being a barrier-free property, there were several inquiries from people in similar situations as mine. That's why I recommended moving out as the wisest choice. Why didn't you say that sooner? What are we supposed to do now? That's not my concern. I clearly explained it to Ken. I wasn't told, we'll sue. Their reaction was as expected. From the outside, it might look as if I suddenly demanded a divorce, relinquished the dwelling, and took away the furniture and appliances. However, I was confident in my position. You're free to sue, but do you have the funds for that? Ken's expression darkened. It was clear this man didn't have the financial means to hire a lawyer. Even if he somehow managed to hire one, I had a decisive advantage. In front of Ken and his in-laws, I presented several photographs. What are these from, I wonder? The photos captured Ken indulging in gambling and nightlife. All of these were funded by me. I am prepared to fight with these. Ken, what is all this about? Everything was supposed to go smoothly. His parents were panicking abnormally. What was happening? Then Ken suddenly started to prostrate himself in apology. I'm sorry. Please cancel the divorce and let's start over. I can't do it without you. You're the one who drove me out. The divorce is already final. You're the one who said you didn't love me. So all I'm doing is leaving. Then his in-laws also started prostrating themselves beside Ken. We have nowhere to live now. This situation was completely unexpected. What do you mean? Our house is going to be seized. A shocking fact was revealed. Ken's family home was in a situation where they had to vacate in a few weeks. They were actually bankrupt. The enormous debt accumulated by the father-in-law kept snowballing, and with just their pensions, repayment was impossible. I understood then why Ken, who used to receive an allowance from his parents during his bachelor days, considered marriage as a way out of this predicament. The reason why my mother-in-law was particularly kind before the marriage now made sense. Apologies now change nothing. We are strangers. There's nothing I can or will do for you. You don't care if we end up homeless? That's your responsibility. Can't you at least give us the furniture and appliances? You're not struggling for money. Are you planning to sell them? No, haha. Their intention was clear. I firmly stated that I had no intention of giving away any furniture or appliances. Don't say things like that. Please, help us somehow. It's too late for apologies now. Solve your own problems. We're asking for help because we can't solve them. To their persistent pleas, I stated if they couldn't pay the rent, they had no choice but to vacate. The property was leased under my name, and it was easy to get them out by terminating the contract. Evicting them went smoother than expected. Even with a name change, it would be impossible for the unemployed Ken to continue living there. This was confirmed with the real estate agent. I can afford the rent. Eventually, the termination of this property lease was decided. There's no longer any business of mine there, and with the divorce already finalized, everything ended then. After managing to evict them, I locked the door and saw their astonishment. What are we supposed to do now? I'm already prepared to move into the facility. Goodbye. Don't joke. That facility, surely you'll have no freedom there and it'll be the worst. Try your best in that terrible environment. Ken couldn't resist throwing a sarcastic remark my way before finally leaving. I ignored his words and left Ken and his parents behind. However, Ken wouldn't just let it be and visited the facility I had moved into a few days later. What is this about? Ken was lost for words at the sight of the facility I had chosen. Talks of a terrible environment were greatly exaggerated. This place is top-notch. The facility I chose is a luxury one, worth about $700,000. I acquired the facility with the money I had saved over the years and the funds I had grown through investments. As a tenant just moved out, I was able to start living here. The temporary income from selling some appliances also helped, leaving me financially comfortable. The facility offers services worth its price, with doctors and helpers always on site. The layout is a spacious 3 rooms, creating a comfortable environment even for families. Hence, many couples and families also reside there. Daily assisted bathing services are provided, and there's a system in place to call for a helper whenever needed. Originally intended as a place to spend the final chapter of my life, I'm satisfied with my choice now that I'm living here. I had no idea you were so wealthy. So what if I was? It's a nuisance for you to show up here. We're strangers now, so could you please leave? At this point, Ken suddenly started behaving in a coquettish manner towards me. It was truly unpleasant. Can't you let me live here, just me? What are you saying? That's absolutely impossible. We're divorced. Accept the reality. But let's remarry. Actually, I'm living in an internet cafe now. Pitiful, isn't it? Without an address, I can't find a job. Such a self-serving man. Always putting his own convenience first. It seems he quickly abandoned his parents as well. He's utterly self-centered. Why don't you take a look in the mirror? You're looking quite miserable right now. What? Even as an adult, you're still taking money from your parents, living off your marriage like a parasite. And now you're practically a beggar without a home? Pathetic. Ken's face rapidly turned red. Aren't you embarrassed to be begging your ex-wife like this? Look, everyone's watching. Residents on the balcony were looking our way. In fact, I had asked for this in advance in case my ex-husband comes visiting. For everyone to witness his pitiful state. I had anticipated that Ken would eventually come to me, either to console me, believing I'd be in a miserable state in the facility, or to seek assistance. The community was very supportive, intentionally giving Ken sympathetic looks. Their acting was so realistic and moving, almost deserving of an applause. Bathed in the gaze of onlookers, Ken seemed to realize how dishonorable his actions were. I won't ask anymore." Leaving those words behind with a pale face, he left. This should prevent him from coming again. Later, I ran into my mother-in-law who was working as a cashier at a supermarket. It appears my father-in-law was doing cleaning work and my mother-in-law was on register duty. Upon seeing me, my mother-in-law hurriedly hid her face and avoided me. She was being scolded by a younger female employee for her behavior. I heard Ken was introduced to a job by someone he met at the internet cafe, working in a tough environment for a very low wage. As for me, I frequently host home parties, enjoying my time with people in the facility. I've made friends with other wheelchair users, and with such a community, I wish I had moved here sooner. I'm living a comfortable and happy life. After a long time, I've also been able to devote time to rehabilitation. Currently, I'm working towards being able to walk a bit on my own feet. I'm spending my days satisfied with both my work and personal life. Now the house is mine. If you have any complaints, let's get a divorce. I felt giddy as Ben happily told me he had changed the house to his name shortly after my father's death. There's no way such a change of ownership could be that easy. I thought Ben might be misunderstanding something. If that's the case, I don't mind getting a divorce, but won't you regret it? Not expecting me to agree to a divorce, Ben exclaimed in surprise. What? There's no way I would regret it. Ben replied with full confidence. Will he truly not regret it? If so, I won't hold back either. If he regrets it later, it's not my concern. I laughed inwardly at Ben's naive thinking. I am Kathy Anderson, a 35-year-old public servant with a hard-working personality. I believe that my current profession as a public servant suits me the most. When I passed the civil service exam, my parents were very happy. It was because I was always told by my father to aim for a stable job as much as possible. If I was asked whether civil service jobs are stable, I'd have to say there's no certainty in modern society. However, at present, there are no major troubles, and I expect to continue working as a public servant. There's a reason why my father recommended a stable job. After graduating from university, he chose to work at a startup. Filled with enthusiasm for his new career, he aimed to improve his skills and jumped into a company with only 10 employees. However, sustaining a business for years is a significant challenge. The company my father joined unfortunately went bankrupt after 2 years. While struggling to find a suitable re-employment, my father decided to start his own business. Lacking experience, he started in the food industry and gradually grew his business. As the number of stores increased, he hired many employees and kept an eye on daily sales and profits. Since most of the stores were operated in renovated vacant houses or owned properties, there was no worry about rent. As a result, as the number of customers increased, the revenue grew, and he built a considerable fortune over 35 years. However, he also experienced many hardships during that process. The instability of a life as an entrepreneur accumulated daily stress. As profits began to rise, people motivated by money gathered, leading to difficulties in human relationships. Sometimes, employees would even take off with the store's funds. Building wealth was not easy. Therefore, I think my father wanted me to avoid the hardships he experienced and wished for a comfortable life for me. I am satisfied with my job as a public servant, a job that suits my nature. While not affluent, I can maintain a normal life without any issues. Hence, I believe stable days like these are the best. I'll be home late tomorrow, so I don't need dinner. That was my husband, Ben, informing me. This wasn't the first time he had said this. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, I asked while wiping my hands, "Working overtime again? Is the factory that busy?" "It's a busy period right now." Ben works in a semiconductor manufacturing plant on the assembly line. Having worked in this job for 18 years since graduating high school can be extremely challenging, considering you process parts every day for 8 hours straight. It's nothing for me, but for Ben it seems to be easier than using his brain. I can understand since semiconductors have been scarce recently. Must be tough. Yes, so I might be a bit late. Understood. Take care. Lately, it's become common for him to come home late, sometimes not returning until after midnight in the worst case. I can hardly believe he's working this late, so he's probably having a drink somewhere after work. I understand the urge to unwind with alcohol, but I feel the frequency has increased too much. However, it's difficult to say that to Ben. Telling him not to drink when he's exhausted from his daily demanding job might provoke a backlash. Fortunately, his drinking expenses are covered by his own allowance, so it's not a big issue. As I watch Ben head to the bedroom, I roll my shoulders extensively. Lately, my shoulder pain has worsened. Life with Ben is full of mismatches, and it seems like the mental stress is starting to manifest itself physically. I try to tell myself not to overthink. I met Ben during my second year of high school. He was attending a nearby boys' high school and approached me during a cultural festival. Initially hesitant when the younger Ben asked for my contact information, I eventually gave in to his persistent approach. When I asked why he was so interested in someone as plain as me, he shyly admitted that he liked my appearance. On the other hand, I had a rather frivolous impression of Ben at first, so I was quite worried. However, contrary to my expectations, his sincere personality became evident, and I gradually found myself drawn to him. Even after Ben started working post-high school and I became a civil servant following university, he has always been my partner. We got married at 27 but haven't been blessed with children. It may not be possible anymore, but I feel our life together is not bad. As long as I can spend the future with the present Ben, that's enough. He probably feels the same. In the midst of these peaceful yet busy days, an unexpected call came to my phone. Hello? Kathy. Oh, good. You're there. Are you at work? Yes, what's up? A call from my mother during a weekday in the afternoon was unusual, signaling something must have happened. I asked her why she called. We have a problem. Your father suddenly collapsed. And today, we got the results from the tests. He's been diagnosed with colon cancer. Dad has cancer? I can't believe it. The word cancer from my mother left me shocked. We've never had cancer in our family before. But it's true that my father, being a business owner, had neglected his health checkups. So, it's not surprising that the disease was discovered late. I'm telling the truth. And it seems to be quite advanced. That's terrible. But aren't there advanced treatments for cancer these days? Unfortunately, in his case, they said he only has a few months left. A few months? That's unbelievable. It was an unbearable reality. At 60, my father's rapid cancer progression made sense. Due to the late discovery, the cancer was terminal, and despite medical advancements, treatment would be challenging. My mother explained through tears. I understand. I'll return home for a bit. I'll talk to Ben too. That would be helpful, Kathy. My father is an important figure to me. I couldn't just stand by when he's in trouble. Ben would understand. Distracted, I finished my work and headed home. Ben, who had returned home unusually early, noticed my somber demeanor and asked, "What's wrong? You seem down." Ben was enjoying a beer in the living room. I shared everything about my mother's call with Ben and discussed returning to my parents' home for a while. That's worrisome. Understood. Support your father while you're there. Thank you. Sorry for not being able to prepare meals while I'm away. No problem. I've been getting home late from work lately. I'll just eat out in the meantime. But you should have a proper meal once in a while. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Ben listened calmly. Feeling reassured, I started packing for my trip home the next day. As bedtime approached and I was about to head to my room, I heard Ben's voice on the phone from his room. He must be talking to someone. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but I stopped in my tracks when I caught a snippet of his conversation. It seems he will pass away soon. Can you do something about the matter we discussed earlier? Pass away? Was he talking about my father? Yes, that's right. I understand. Please take care of it once he's gone. It wasn't clear who he was talking to or what the arrangement was, but it was evident that the conversation was about my father's situation. Why use such a term as gone? Ben had never spoken disrespectfully about my father, even if their relationship wasn't especially close. Ben wasn't the type to be indifferent in such a critical situation. Yet, why does it seem like Ben doesn't care about my father? Even though my father is terminally ill, he is still alive, and discussing matters after he is gone with someone else is inappropriate. At that moment, my trust in Ben wavered. Since then, I couldn't shake off my suspicions about Ben. "Take care," Ben said cheerfully as he saw me off, but I couldn't stop thinking about his phone conversation on my way home. It seemed like he was plotting something. If it's related to my father, it must be about money. I never told Ben about the extent of my father's wealth. I felt discussing finances might lead to problems, so I decided we could discuss inheritance when the time came. At this stage, I didn't see the necessity to talk about it. I wasn't hiding it. I just thought it was premature. But what if Ben knew about my father's wealth and was targeting it? I shouldn't think about it too much. While trying to dispel these negative thoughts, I spent time supporting my father and enjoying pleasant conversations. "I'm grateful, Kathy, Mom. I'm a lucky man. You don't have to be so formal. It's too early to be thankful." We tried to maintain a cheerful atmosphere while looking at my father's calm smile. The last moments with my father ended 3 months later. Neither my mother nor I were fully prepared for the premature goodbye. During the funeral, I was in a daze, struggling to accept the reality that my father was no longer in this world. On the other hand, Ben was oddly cheerful, which felt unsettling to me. It wasn't until a week after the funeral, as I was drinking alone in the living room, that Ben approached and said, "The hassle is finally over." Crossing his arms and clasping his hands behind his head, he spoke with a cold gaze. "Hassle? Yes, exactly. I was hoping your father would kick the bucket a bit sooner. But even after that, there were still procedures like the funeral to deal with, so it was a pain in the butt." "How can you say that? Someone has died, my father at that. How can you talk like that?" I couldn't help but retort to Ben's astonishing statement. It became clear that Ben had actually wished for my father's early death. I remembered the phone conversation about my father. What were Ben's true intentions? "When can we receive the inheritance? Your family is quite wealthy, right? I know there's a substantial fortune to be had." At that moment, I understood what Ben had been aiming for. I never imagined Ben would have his eyes on my family's wealth. I had never discussed my family's financial situation with Ben. However, it seems Ben knew that my father had substantial assets. "You look like you're wondering how I knew." I can understand. My family was always poor. Securing daily meals was a struggle. On the other hand, I heard your family was wealthy and your parents often went on trips. Just that fact alone made it clear your family was affluent. That's why I made some inquiries beforehand. Inquiries? With whom? Ben used the word inquiries after guessing my family's financial situation. The day Ben was on the phone in the bedroom flashed through my mind, and I wondered if that was the inquiry he mentioned. I asked a real estate lawyer acquaintance about the old man's inheritance. "I'm going to make sure to receive the inheritance properly." "What?" I was shocked that he had discussed the inheritance with someone else without my consent, and doing so while my father was still alive. At that moment, I began to doubt whether the person in front of me was truly my husband. "You'll get a response soon. Just wait." With that, Ben returned to the bedroom. He was probably going to contact that lawyer again. I was just astonished by his unbelievable actions. Why would he investigate my family's inheritance on his own? Is there any other spouse who would do such a thing? Inheritance is a matter our family should discuss, not for Ben to get involved in. My trust in his actions wavered, and I started avoiding conversations with him. We spent some time without speaking, but the situation changed drastically a month later. Putting aside Ben's previous comments on inheritance, the estate was formally transferred to my mother and me. I inherited my father's mansion worth $2 million and felt the weight of this asset. I had no intention of moving into the mansion right away, and it seemed a waste to just leave it unused. While I was contemplating whether to turn it into a vacation home or sell it, Ben suddenly spoke to me after not having exchanged words for days. "Hey, Kathy, how are you doing?" How ironic, considering we lived under the same roof. Ignoring his words, I reached for a book nearby, but he continued, "Listen, I've changed the ownership of the mansion you inherited to my name." I stopped reading and stared at him in astonishment. "What are you talking about?" Yeah, I asked that real estate lawyer to proceed with the title transfer. You did a title transfer, really? Yes, really. I was speechless. Not only did he do it behind my back, I also had a problem with the lawyer involved. Now the house is mine. If you have a problem with that, we can get a divorce. And I'll be giving the house to my family. My brother has been wanting a larger house, so I want to make him happy. Just after my father's death, Ben was happily talking about changing the house to his name, and I felt dizzy. It seemed unlikely that a title transfer could be done so easily. And for his family to move in? I thought Ben might be misunderstanding something but was at a loss for words. His actions infuriated me, and I couldn't let this go. It would be better to plan and retaliate rather than confront him with words. If that's the case, I don't mind getting a divorce, but won't you regret it? Ben seemed surprised that I would accept a divorce so readily. Regret? There's no way I would. Ben replied with full confidence. Will he truly not regret it? If so, I won't hold back either. If he regrets it later, that's his problem. I smirked inwardly at Ben's naivety. I decided to use every means possible to gather information about Ben's personal life. I decided to take a vacation and inspect Ben's room while he was at work. Ben's room was a mess, with various items scattered all over the floor. There, I found something and quietly slipped it into my pocket. Next, I reached for the computer on Ben's desk and launched the messaging app. I see, this person is the real estate lawyer dealing with legal issues. The messages exchanged with James Owen were appalling. They were mostly about money. The discussions were about how to illicitly acquire funds. I sighed in surprise. It seemed pitiful that Ben was following such a person's instructions. After leaving the room, I headed to a certain location. After repeating tiring tasks, I went to confirm Ben's greed. The deeper I investigated, the more I realized what kind of person I've actually been living with. That sent a chill down my spine. After concluding the investigation about Ben and feeling completely detached, I decided to file for divorce. My marriage with Ben ended legally once the divorce papers got granted at the municipal office. It was an unexpected separation, but I no longer had any affection towards Ben, who disdained my father. The Ben I knew was nowhere to be found. The investigation revealed Ben to be an unbelievable person. After submitting the divorce papers, the house was no longer mine. In fact, the house was purchased in Ben's name from the beginning, with a mortgage taken out. I considered moving out, but Ben did not return to the house afterward. He's probably living in the mansion I inherited. He might be living comfortably now, but how long will that happiness last? I calmly thought about Ben's future. 3 days later, Ben finally appeared before me. Kathy, has the divorce already been granted? He asked anxiously as he entered through the front door. He came back suddenly and asked an impertinent question, to which I responded, "What? So, we're divorced, right?" Ben exclaimed loudly. He seemed to be in extreme distress. Yes, it was granted 3 days ago. So, we are now strangers to each other. What does that mean? Disappointment gradually appeared on Ben's face. Despite his own desire for divorce, I wished he wouldn't adopt a blaming attitude. Why would you make such a unilateral decision? Divorce, really? Unilateral? You're the one who wanted a divorce, remember? What are you talking about now? Ben fell silent at my logical response. His sudden issue with the divorce was clear to me. Kathy, please, let's start over. Otherwise, I'll. Ben knelt down, looking dejected. While feeling sorry for him, I asked, "Did something happen?" I had a rough idea of what was going on, but decided to delve deeper. Just now, debt collectors came looking for me. I tried contacting James Owen, but he seems to have changed his phone number and I can't get through. I sent an email but got no response. It looks like I've been deceived by him. James Owen was that self-proclaimed real estate lawyer. While Ben's explanation was fragmented, I grasped the gist of the situation. It became clear what Ben had been involved in when I searched through his room. It seems you were obsessed with gambling. There were gambling receipts scattered all over your room. I also investigated your visits to the local casino. You've been going there for almost a year, right? Is that why you ran out of funds? Checking our joint bank account, I noticed gradual withdrawals that I couldn't recall, and it turned out you were also taking money from our savings. Is that why you were duped by that real estate lawyer? Exactly. Ben had been secretly spending his days gambling without my knowledge. The reason for his late returns was not due to drinking parties but because of gambling. When the inheritance from my father came up, it must have seemed like an opportunity for him. He had consulted with the so-called real estate lawyer Owen on how to get his hands on the inheritance. Yes, that's right. I know gambling is wrong, but I was deceived by that person. The grand mansion that Kathy inherited didn't become mine. I'll go bankrupt at this rate. That would be sad, right? That's why I'm asking for help. How ironic of him to propose divorce only to beg for reconciliation later. I felt contempt rather than anger for the pitiful behavior of my former partner. Has he forgotten that he secretly wished for my father's death and insulted him? I couldn't even consider that man as my ex-husband. What are you talking about? You're the problem, aren't you? Sympathy. I have no such feelings for you. After all, getting deceived was also due to your carelessness. The real estate inherited from my father is in my name and not subject to division. Changing its ownership without consent is impossible. Yet, you were naive enough to get deceived by James Owen and now you come asking for help? I will never forgive you, not in a lifetime. Seeing my face filled with anger, Ben got scared. I opened the front door, leaving him aside. If you don't mind, I will move to the luxurious house I inherited from my father. As for you, try to manage your life in this house. Oh, and don't forget about the loan repayment. Good luck. Wait. Despite his call from behind, I coldly left him behind and walked away with dignity. 7 days later, I was surprised by an unexpected call. Seeing the name displayed on the screen, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Ben's mother. I answered the phone, anxious that she might criticize me for the divorce. However, the words I heard were completely unexpected and surprising. Kathy, I'm truly sorry. My son seems to have committed something unforgivable towards you. I'm honestly at a loss for words on how to apologize. Her voice was filled with deep regret and apology. I responded with some confusion. No, there's no need for an apology. Please don't worry about it. But she didn't accept my words. No, I can't just leave things as they are. I heard my son is trying to have you shoulder his debt repayments, and I'm both shocked and profoundly disappointed. We plan to give him strict guidance at home from now on. I've warned him to be prepared for a tough time. We won't let him gamble ever again and we'll teach him the importance of money management. For a while, he'll have to take on all responsibilities for work and home life on his own, she expressed her firm resolve. Ben's mother felt strong anger towards her son's inappropriate actions, and he was about to face some harsh days, she passionately explained. I secretly hoped to see how Ben would confront this, feeling this was a just retribution for him, who scorned my father and tried to swindle away the property I cherished. I had no ounce of sympathy for him. I genuinely hoped he would dedicate himself to repaying his debts. And as planned, I moved to the magnificent mansion I inherited from my father. This new home, furnished and requiring no additional purchases, filled me with a profound sense of satisfaction for the new life ahead. Although I left behind clothes and other small items at the old house, the excitement for the liberating life ahead made me unstoppable. The new residence was spacious, an extravagance for one person. Currently, I'm not keen on remarrying. However, if fate smiles at me and I meet a soulmate again, I'll invite that special person to this expansive living space. Imagining the expression on the future spouse's face as they enter this house brought a smile to mine. This hopeful anticipation is a significant light of hope for me now. And I sincerely say, thank you, Dad. This valuable house, his last gift, is more than a physical space. It's the foundation for starting a new life, a place that connects me to the past and steps into the future.